Chapter 683. Shi Mengwan forced herself to look away. Coincidentally, Wan Xianying was also looking at her. He leaned close to her ear and said softly, "Are you bored? It's fine. We'll leave after a while. I'll treat you to a big meal later." Shi Mengwan couldn't help but laugh because of his words. This person was really casual when doing things. He left as soon as he said he would. After being distracted by Wan Xianying, Shi Mengwan wasn't so nervous anymore. She took 2 steps back without leaving a trace and retreated behind Dong Yi and the others. Wan Xianying smiled and retreated. This way, he wouldn't be eye-catching. After all, it was indeed impolite to leave without saying goodbye. Chen Feifei was surprised when she saw Shi Mengwan just now, but it was only for a moment. She was representing the Qin family and Qin Yongchang today. "Hello, Grandpa Dong." As Chen Feifei spoke, she handed over the gift in her hand. "I wish you happiness as vast as the East Sea and longevity as the South Mountain." "Good." Old Master Dong nodded repeatedly and looked at Zhan Haoze. He took a step forward. "I wish you good health and a long life." Shi Mengwan was stunned for a moment. Zhan Haoze's congratulatory words were the same as hers. Although the blessings were the same over and over again, this feeling was indeed. Zhan Haoze had prepared another gift for Old Master Dong. He had also interacted with Old Master Dong a few times. It was a form of respect for him. "Good. You're very considerate." Old Master Dong liked to interact with the younger generation. Looking at these young people, he felt that he was young. "Since you're here, don't stand on ceremony. You're all young people. Go and play with the young people." As he spoke, he thought of Wan Xianying. He waved his hand and gestured for Wan Xianying to come over. "Kid from the Wan family, let me introduce you. You've been in Rong City all this time, so you might not know him. This is Zhan Haoze. He can be considered one of the outstanding young people in Lin City. Haoze, this is Wan Xianying from Rong City. His Gu Langxian is very famous in the country." "Old Master, you're too polite." Wan Xianying smiled and reached out his hand. "Hello, I'm Wan Xianying. Zhan Haoze." Zhan Haoze reached out his hand and shook Wan Xianying's hand. He didn't know if it was Wan Xianying's imagination, but why did he feel that Zhan Haoze's handshake? Wan Xianying felt a little pain in his hand when he let go. Although he knew some kung fu and usually worked out, there was still a difference between him and Zhan Haoze, who came from a real fighting background. Seeing that someone had come over to congratulate Grandfather Dong on his birthday, he took Shi Mengwan to the side to avoid them. Zhan Haoze and Chen Feifei also stood over. After leaving Elder Dong's side, the group of people inexplicably stood together again. "Nice to meet you. What kind of business does President Zhan do? Maybe we can work together if there's a chance." Wan Xianying had always been slick and never offended anyone. Among Hu Jinyao's childhood friends, he was the smoothest. "There will be a chance." As Zhan Haoze spoke, his gaze inadvertently swept across Shi Mengwan's face. He nodded slightly and said, "Miss Shi. What a coincidence." As soon as these words came out, the other 3 people present were shocked. Especially Shi Mengwan. She couldn't believe that Zhan Haoze actually greeted her. Chen Feifei couldn't help but take another look at him. Then, she went to hold Zhan Haoze's arm. "Brother Hao, do you still remember Miss Shi? Wasn't your clothes designed by Miss Shi?" Zhan Haoze said it casually. When Chen Feifei appeared in front of him wearing this today, she even shocked him. He thought that this set of clothes was different for Shi Mengwan and that she wouldn't be willing to sell it. Who knew that not only did she sell it, but she also sold it to Chen Feifei. Chen Feifei pouted and remembered that she had indeed mentioned it when she was wearing this set of clothes today. She felt a little annoyed. In her heart, all women were her potential rivals in love. She really didn't want Zhan Haoze to notice other women, even if it was just a name. Because of Zhan Haoze's words, Wan Xianying looked at Shi Mengwan. There was obvious admiration and surprise in his eyes. "I always knew that you were very powerful, but I really didn't expect you to be even more powerful." Shi Mengwan was a little embarrassed. She smiled faintly. "It's nothing. There's just a specialty in the industry." Seeing that Chen Feifei and Zhan Haoze were still standing there without moving, she looked at Wan Xianying. I'm a little hungry. Let's go sit down. Okay. Wan Xianyang nodded and glanced at Zhang Haoze and Chen Feifei. Excuse me. They left. Zhang Haoze stood there with a gloomy gaze. Chen Feifei's hand was still hooked around his arm, so he retracted his hand without a trace. Brother Hao. Let's go find a seat and sit down. Zhang Haoze retracted his hand when Chen Feifei was about to hook her hand over again. The two of them went to their seats and sat down. Brother Hao, there are really a lot of people here today. Not to mention anything else, Chen Feifei also saw Su Qinghui. One had to know that the Su family's identity wasn't ordinary. Usually, they wouldn't come to a banquet like the Dong families. Zhang Haoze didn't hear Chen Feifei's words. He looked in Su Qinghui's direction. If he remembered correctly, Su Qinghui seemed to have gone out on his own. Brother Hao? Are you listening to me? Eat. Zhang Haoze's voice was indifferent. Chen Feifei gritted her teeth. Today, she wore a new dress and specially dressed herself up, but Zhang Haoze just didn't look at her. This made her very discouraged, and her expression became more and more unsightly. Brother Hao. She wanted to flare up, but this was someone else's place, so she couldn't go too far. She could only turn around and sulk, thinking that Zhang Haoze would coax her. Who knew that Zhang Haoze still wouldn't look at her, which made Chen Feifei quite angry. On the other side, Wan Xianyang kept teasing Shi Mengwan. He was afraid that she would feel uncomfortable in such a place, so he would find some interesting things to make her happy from time to time. Shi Mengwan was so amused by him that she really forgot about what happened before. There was a smile on her face. However, she didn't know that her smile became more and more gloomy in Zhang Haoze's eyes. Halfway through the banquet, Wan Xianyang left with Shi Mengwan. Before leaving, she casually looked around the banquet hall and found that Zhang Haoze and Chen Feifei weren't there. She quickly retracted her gaze and left with Wan Xianyang. Wan Xianyang was also a wonderful person. He left the hotel but didn't bring her home. Instead, he found a place to change out of the flamboyant gown he was wearing. Shi Mengwan looked at the t-shirt and jeans on her body and couldn't come back to her senses. Where are we going? Guess? Wan Xianyang kept her in suspense. When he put on his suit and gown, he looked like a successful person. However, when he changed into jeans and a t-shirt, he looked a little unrestrained. What surprised Shi Mengwan even more was that he actually brought her to the snack stall behind the university town. When Shi Mengwan got out of the car, she thought that there was something wrong with her eyes. I guess you haven't been here for a long time, right? Shi Mengwan nodded. It had indeed been a long time since she came. She used to come with Su Qingsang. However, Su Qingsang was very busy. A medical student couldn't be compared to a fashion design major like her. She had to take a lot of exams. Even when she wasn't rushing for her thesis, she still had a lot of things to do. However, they still came here a lot of times. Shi Mengwan smelled the familiar smell in the air and really missed it. Let's go. I heard that the oyster omelette at the first stall is especially delicious. You even know this? Shi Mengwan was even more surprised now. Wan Xianyang smiled very proudly. Of course, I did my homework. He brought Shi Mengwan to the stall inside. Shi Mengwan looked at the familiar stalls on both sides. It had to be said that her background made her feel that this kind of environment was more suitable for her. Those banquets with toasts and fragrant clothes looked elegant, but in fact, she really didn't like it. Shi Mengwan used to come here often, and Wan Xianyang had also done his homework. The two of them picked some delicious stalls and ate from the street. When Shi Mengwan ate to the end of the street, she felt a little full. I'm so full. Do you want to go for a walk to digest your food? Shi Mengwan looked at the time and shook her head. There's no need, right? It's very late. I still have to work tomorrow. That's a pity. Wan Xianyang sighed. I still wanted to spend more time with you today. After all, I'm leaving tomorrow. Seeing that Shi Mengwan didn't feel any reluctance to part with him, Wan Xianyang clicked his tongue. You're so cold. I've said so much. Can't you pretend that you can't bear to part with me? Shi Mengwan couldn't pretend. Wan Xianyang, actually, you're a very good person, but, stop. Wan Xianyang stopped her. As for me, I don't think I'm a good person, so I don't need you to give me a good person card. Shi Mengwan smiled. Well, then you're not a good person, but I am, so we're not suitable. Meng, you really know how to hurt me. When Wan Xianyang was in the direction of the parking lot, he took her in the direction of the parking lot. I'm really curious now. What kind of man do you want to be in your eyes? Could it be that you want to be a god? He had asked Su Qingsang many times, but Su Qingsang just refused to tell him, which made him extremely depressed. Zhan Hao's face flashed across Shi Mengwan's mind. She said self-deprecatingly, no, maybe not a god, but Satan. Ha! Wan Xianyang really couldn't help laughing this time. What should I do? Ming'an, I really like you more and more. That's difficult. Shi Mengwan could tell that he was joking, so she also regained some calmness. Because although you're not a good person, you're not Satan. Wan Xianyang smiled even more brightly. The two of them walked to the parking lot, and it was almost time to stop. They got into the car. It wasn't far from Shi Mengwan's apartment. Not long after, they arrived at the apartment building. Shi Mengwan got out of the car and was about to go home, but Wan Xianyang stopped her. He got out of the car and took out the dress that Shi Mengwan had changed out of at the clothing store from the back seat. You haven't carried this yet. Thank you. Shi Mengwan thanked him. Remembering that the other party's earrings were still on her ears, she raised her hand to take them off. You don't have to return this to me. Wan Xianyang looked at Shi Mengwan. You've already rejected me, and now you're returning my things. You're too cruel to make me think about how I was rejected by you every day. You can give it to someone else. Shi Mengwan felt rude after saying that. But this is too expensive. I really can't accept it. Do you really have to be so polite with me? Then I really don't mind turning into Satan tonight. Since he said that, Shi Mengwan couldn't continue. She could only stop. Thank you. I should be the one thanking you. Wan Xianyang wasn't being polite. It's not that I haven't been to Lin City before, but I really didn't realize that Lin City was so fun. So you see, I should be thanking you. Wan Xianyang. All right. Go up. If you continue, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist going upstairs to ask you for a cup of coffee. This person was really, Shi Mengwan took a step back and wanted to leave, but Wan Xianyang suddenly called out to her. She stopped in her tracks, but he suddenly reached out and took a leaf from her head. It might have been stained just now. Thank you. All right, do you want to count how many times you've said thank you today? He suddenly moved his face closer with a teasing smile on his face. Maybe you can kiss me as a thank you gift. Shi Mengwan took a big step back because of his action. She didn't say thank you anymore and turned to leave. Wan Xianyang looked at her back and let out a long sigh. King Xiang had a dream, and the goddess had no heart. It really made him sad. He got into the car again and left. Naturally, he didn't know that on the balcony of Shi Mengwan's apartment, someone was staring downstairs. He had seen the intimate action between the two of them just now. Shi Mengwan went upstairs. Other than her bag, she was also carrying the clothes. She thought about what Wan Xianyang said just now. If she hadn't met Zhan Haoze, Wan Xianyang would really be a good man. Unfortunately, but tonight's date was still very pleasant. She had been very busy these days. Especially after Su Qingsang left, there weren't many classmates who could contact her, and she didn't have many friends in Lin City. It had indeed been a long time since she went to the university town. She didn't expect Wan Xianyang to know. It was obvious that he came because he asked Su Qingsang. But this was considered attentive. She didn't feel anything for a man who pursued her with so much effort. Shi Mengwan laughed at herself in her heart. She was afraid that she would have to lose her memory one day and completely forget Zhan Haoze before she could accept other men again, right? After entering the door, Shi Mengwan casually threw the dress on the sofa. She didn't notice that there was a figure standing on her balcony. She was tired after a long day. She went home to relax and directly stepped on the ground with her bare feet. She was too full at night, so she stretched, put down her bag, and went into the bathroom to take a shower. Halfway through the shower, she seemed to hear a slight click. She stopped and turned off the water. Just as she was about to go out to take a look, the bathroom door was pushed open. Shi Mengwan was shocked. She reached out to grab the bath towel, but she stayed under the shower. Whether it was the bath towel or the offensive weapon, they were all very far away from her. She took 3 steps to close the door, but the person outside had already come in. Shi Mengwan was shocked. She didn't have time to scream, nor did she have time to find cover. She only wanted to push the person out, but she saw the person's face. Zhang Haoze? She was in a state of shock, and her breathing wasn't smooth. If it weren't for her strong willpower, she might not have been able to control her emotions. She looked at Zhang Haoze, and Zhang Haoze was also looking at her. She was covered in water, and her long hair was wet and draped over her head. Because she had been taking a shower just now, her fair skin was extremely beautiful crimson. He was wearing the suit he had worn at the banquet. It took Shi Mengwan nearly a minute to recover from the frightening environment. She looked at Zhang Haoze, her eyes full of wariness. Why are you here? Get out. Zhang Haoze didn't leave. Instead, he took a step forward. As he moved forward, Shi Mengwan retreated. However, she had just taken a shower, and the ground was covered in water. It was very slippery. She retreated in a hurry, and her feet were unsteady. Her body lost its balance and she fell backwards. Zhang Haoze quickly supported her waist. Before she could stand firmly, her body was already in his arms. The water droplets on her body wet Zhang Haoze's suit. Shi Mengwan placed her hands on his chest, wanting him to let go of her. Zhang Haoze easily lifted her body and tilted his head. He didn't care that her face and body were covered in water, and kissed her lips just like that. Shi Mengwan's eyes widened, and she quickly struggled. However, it was useless. Zhang Haoze's strength was much greater than hers, and his kiss was extremely fierce. Shi Mengwan's mouth was in pain and numb from his kiss. She was furious, and she opened her mouth to bite back at his lips. Zhang Haoze stepped back so that she wouldn't succeed. He lowered his head and bit her neck hard. Shi Mengwan was in pain. She wanted to push Zhang Haoze away, but he didn't let go. His teeth went deep into her flesh. Shi Mengwan's tears were about to fall. Zhang Haoze let go of her mouth at this moment, but he didn't let go of her. He lifted her body again and pressed it against the wall at the side. Shi Mengwan's back hit the wall, and the cold tiles made her feel cold. Zhang Haoze's arms in front of her were also cold because of the water. She shrunk her body and glared at him hatefully. Are you crazy? Zhang Haoze stared at the teeth mark on her shoulder. His slender fingers stroked it and pressed hard. Tell me, where did he touch you? Shi Mengwan didn't understand what Zhang Haoze meant at first. Zhang Haoze firmly fixed her body against the wall, lowered his head, and bit her cheek. It wasn't heavy, but it hurt. Zhang Haoze, tell me, where did he touch you? He saw that Shi Mengwan had already changed her clothes when she came back, and the first thing she did when she came back was to take a shower. He also saw that when they were downstairs, that damned Wan Xianyang was kissing and hugging Shi Mengwan. The reason why he thought so was purely because of the angle. He wanted to go crazy, but Shi Mengwan didn't intend to go crazy with him. Crazy, let go of me. You're not going to tell me? Zhang Haoze nodded and pulled away her hand that had been covering his chest. Then I'll check it myself. Are you crazy? How could Shi Mengwan let him check? She struggled even more. Zhang Haoze, let go of me. What right do you have to do this to me? Zhang Haoze acted as if he didn't hear her. He stubbornly checked her body. First her cheek, then her lips. He had already kissed her just now. Now it was her arm. He lifted her arm and checked it one by one. When he saw a red mark on it, he pinched it. What is this? Crazy. Shi Mengwan refused to answer his question. Zhang Haoze narrowed his eyes and lowered his head to make a mark on her arm, covering up her original mark. His movements were definitely not gentle. Shi Mengwan wanted to pull her hand back, but she wasn't his match at all. He changed her arm and didn't find the mark he thought he was looking for. He seemed to be a little disappointed. He went to check her body again. In order to wear a gown today, she didn't wear a traditional underwear. Instead, she used a bra scarf. If she wore that, it would naturally leave some marks. That circle of red almost hurt Zhang Haoze's eyes. Shi Mengwan felt that he was really crazy. She felt pain and pushed him with all her might. She even reached out to hit his back. But it was useless. Jean Hauser didn't care about her ticklish strength at all. He was extremely stubborn. The water on Shermingwan's body quickly dried up. But the examination wasn't over so easily. She was like Jane Doe on a cross. Not only couldn't she escape, but she also had to let him examine her like this. She felt humiliated, but she couldn't break free. She couldn't get rid of him. After he carefully examined every inch of her body, he didn't seem to be satisfied. In the end, his examination changed. When her body was split open by him, her eyes were filled with tears as she glared at Jean Hauser. "You're raping me." "Rape?" Jean Hauser sneered. He lifted her body up and put it down heavily. "If you say so, then so be it." He leaned close to her ear and bit her earlobe. He said word by word, "You dared to let that man touch you. I'm already being polite by not killing him." "Crazy." Shermengwan gritted her teeth. "Jean Hauser, you bastard. Change some new words." He increased his strength and his breathing became heavier. "Otherwise, I'll treat this as a love interest." Unable to win against him, Shermengwan closed her eyes and turned her face helplessly. Everything seemed to have returned to square one. She was still the Shermengwan who became abnormal the moment she met Jean Hauser. However, Jean Hauser didn't notice. He grabbed her waist and pulled her body tightly into his arms. "Stay away from that man. Don't see him again." Domineering, ostentatious, and full of declaration. She seemed to be able to feel his emotions and monopolize her. That wasn't love. Thinking of this, she felt even more pain. She felt tears seeping out of the corners of her eyes and falling down her cheeks to the ground. Jean Hauser was still moving. When he felt her tears, he stopped for a moment. Looking at Shermengwan, who had her eyes tightly closed, he suddenly leaned over and kissed away her tears one by one. This was a complete plunder. He not only wanted her body, but also her heart and everything about her. "You're mine." Shermengwan couldn't say anything. She wanted to say that she didn't belong to anyone. She belonged to herself. But she couldn't open her mouth anymore. Jean Hauser didn't need her to speak. He lowered his head and kept repeating that sentence in her ear. With his movements, he was bound to make her remember it. Chapter 684. Shermengwan had been living with Qiao Zhe for more than a year. Ever since the last time she saw Qiao Zhe fight with someone, she had never seen Qiao Zhe fight with someone again. She knew that Qiao Zhe was actually hiding something from her. But she also knew that it was his life. Even if she wanted to change it, there was nothing she could do. As long as she told herself that she didn't see it, she could pretend that Qiao Zhe was living a normal life outside. They spent the Mid-Autumn Festival, Spring Festival, Lantern Festival, and Dragon Boat Festival together. After the hottest summer in Lin City, Shermengwan's studies had entered the male track. She was smart and willing to work hard. Even if she stopped for half a semester, she wouldn't be unable to keep up. In the blink of an eye, it was the National Day again. After the National Day, it was the Mid-Autumn Festival. After Shermengwan started living with the young man, the two of them slowly lived a better life. Shermengwan went to school during the day and cleaned the house and did her homework at night. The young man went out during the day and returned home at night. When Shermengwan did her homework, he would read. Shermengwan once thought that the youth had always been a gangster outside, so he didn't know much. But what the youth read were history books and biographies of famous people. In the narrow living room, two people sat under the lamp, each with their own things to do. At night, the two of them had been sleeping on the same bed ever since the weather turned cold last year. Even when it was summer, neither of them said that they wanted to change places. Shermengwan's sleeping posture was actually very good, but it was very strange. Every time she slept, her back was facing the youth, and the two of them maintained a certain distance. But when she woke up in the morning, she would definitely be in the young man's arms. The young man put his hand on her shoulder and circled her in his arms, forming a protective posture. At first, Shermengwan would feel awkward and embarrassed. But as time passed, she no longer felt embarrassed. Especially after a stormy night. That day, the weather was especially bad, with thunder rumbling. The thunder was accompanied by lightning, plunging the entire Lin city into darkness. In the middle of the night, the electricity went out. Shi Mengwan was afraid. She subconsciously sought the young man's embrace. The young man held her in his arms and covered her ears with his hands. "Sleep, I'm here. Big brother. I'll stay with you." The young man's voice, which had gone through puberty, was a little hoarse. "Don't be afraid." She pressed her face against the young man's chest. For a moment, his heart beat louder than the thunder outside. That steady and powerful heartbeat, beat after beat, made her completely forget the fear and terror in her heart. He had the power to calm people, and she liked being close to him like this. From then on, Shi Mengwan no longer turned her back to the youth to sleep. Imperceptibly, the relationship between the two became even closer. It was almost the national day, and Shi Mengwan's school was going to give her a 7-day holiday. She wondered if she could go out with Xiao Zhe for 2 days. She had been in Lin City for so long, but other than that time when she went out to watch the fireworks, she had not gone anywhere seriously. The youth did not object to her suggestion. He thought about it and remembered that there was a Qin mountain in Lin City. It was famous because there was a huge rock on it that looked like a zither. Shi Mengwan had heard of that place. Some of her classmates were from nearby. Because this was the first time she went out with the young man, even if it was to the city's scenic spot. Shi Mengwan was also very happy. She asked her classmates in advance how to get there. "I'll take a bus." On National Day, she prepared some snacks and drinks and went out with the young man. The scenery on Qin Mountain was beautiful. Other than the huge rock that looked like a zither, there were a few other wonders. At that time, the two of them didn't have a camera, so they couldn't take photos. However, Shi Mengwan smiled very happily and was very satisfied. Her stamina wasn't good, so she was exhausted after climbing the mountain for a short while. When the young man went down the mountain, he looked at the sweat on her forehead. He turned around and bent down, gesturing for her to get on his back. Shi Mengwan wasn't willing. "I'm very heavy. I can walk by myself. Dear brother, let's go." The young man just didn't move. He lowered his body and insisted on Shi Mengwan getting on. Shi Mengwan had no choice but to get on the young man's back. On National Day, there were many people on the mountain. The young man carried Shi Mengwan on his back, but his footsteps were very steady. After coming down from the mountain, the two of them waited for a long time, but they didn't see a bus. After Shi Mengwan and Xiao Zhe discussed it, they unanimously decided to walk 2 stops to a place where there was a bus. The two of them had just walked 1 stop when they realized that they might have gone the wrong way. They were still a distance away from the real foot of the mountain. By the time they reacted, a few people had already come in front of them and blocked their path. Shi Mengwan was behind John Hauze. Seeing that those people were frightened, she shrunk her body behind the young man. The young man looked at those people and narrowed his eyes. "Your followers aren't by your side today, right? I want to see how you can be so arrogant today." Xiao Zhe blocked Shi Mengwan behind him and looked at the people in front of him. The corners of his lips curled up with a mocking smile. He turned around and looked at Shi Mengwan. "Go over there and hide. I'll be right there." Shi Mengwan was scared and couldn't help but grab the hem of the young man's clothes tightly. Xiao Zhe patted her hand, signaling her not to be afraid. She quickly ran to the side and hid behind a tree. There seemed to be 8 people, but the young man was only 1 person. Shi Mengwan was extremely worried. However, she saw that the young man was fighting 1 against 8. He wasn't afraid of the punches and kicks that were landing on his body at all. He countered every move. Shi Mengwan's heart was in her throat. She watched as the young man fought back. She also suffered a lot of blows. Her eyes were red. The young man's fists had been accumulated in actual combat. His fists hit the flesh and hit the vitals. 3 or 4 people had already been beaten to the ground by him. The remaining people became angrier, and their counterattacks became more and more powerful. The young man didn't notice and suffered a few more blows. Shi Mengwan became more and more worried. At this moment, a few people appeared out of nowhere. Those people were different from the hooligans just now. Each of them was carrying a stick and a steel pipe as thick as a thumb. Shi Mengwan's eyes widened as she watched the group of people rush towards Xiao Zhe and start fighting. At first, Xiao Zhe was still able to withstand 1 or 2 blows. Later, his hands and body were hit several times by the stick, and his figure began to stagger. Shi Mingwan knew that she would only cause trouble if she went over, but when she saw someone swing that long steel pipe at Xiao Zhe's head, she couldn't help but shout, "Dear brother, be careful." Her shout made Xiao Zhe avoid that blow. However, it also made other people notice her direction. Soon, a few hooligans rushed towards her. Xiao Zhe was anxious. Without thinking, he ran in her direction, but there were too many people on the other side. They surrounded him and he couldn't come over for a while. Shi Mengwan casually picked up the stones on the ground and threw the stones at them when they rushed towards her. However, she was young and didn't have much strength. Other than 1 stone that hit her, the rest of the stones were all empty. The hooligan who was hit by her was enraged. He rushed towards Shi Mengwan and threw a punch. The punch was blocked by Xiao Zhe, who was rushing over. Xiao Zhe protected her behind him. When the other party rushed over, he pushed her and told her to run quickly. Where could Shi Mengwan run to at this time? In her anger, she picked up the wooden stick that had fallen to the ground and waved it around. That kind of disorderly fight didn't have any effect at all. Soon, she was surrounded by a few hooligans. The youth desperately wanted to run in her direction, but it was useless. Shi Mengwan was still beaten in the end. Shi Mengwan was a little girl. When had she ever suffered this? Her body was knocked back a few steps and fell to the ground. The remaining hooligans weren't people who had tender feelings for the fairer sex. Those sticks swung towards Shi Mengwan. At first, she could still protect her head with her hands. Later, she was hit on the head and felt dizzy. She forced herself to tell her dear brother to run. But another blow struck her on the head. She completely lost the ability to resist. The youth wanted to rush over, but a hooligan from before took out a knife and stabbed it at the youth. Dear brother, Shi Mengwan's heart was burning with anxiety. She desperately wanted to save her dear brother, but it was useless. She was hit on the head again, and she started to feel dizzy. Before she fainted, she saw her dear brother dodge the knife, but he didn't dodge the steel pipe waved by a hooligan behind him. His body also fell down. Dear brother, she wanted to scream, but she couldn't. She could only let the darkness pull her consciousness away. When she woke up again, she was already in the hospital. Beside her were the worried father Shi and mother Shi. They had been looking for her for more than a year. They had even put her on the missing persons website. She was clearly in Lin City, but her parents didn't know. She didn't know how she got to the hospital. Later, she heard that someone had called the police. When the police arrived, she was already there. Other than her, there were also a few injured hooligans. Shi Mengwan was rescued by the police and brought to the hospital. They found her parents and informed the Shi couple to pick her up. When she woke up, it had been 3 days since the attack. She asked her parents where her dear brother was. But no one knew where he was. Even the police said that there was no such person. Not only that, but those hooligans also said that they had never met Xiao Zhe. Xiao Zhe seemed to have disappeared from the world. No matter how she asked or searched, there was no information about Xiao Zhe. The police even told Shi Mengwan that there was no one called Xiao Zhe in Lin City. She didn't believe it and insisted on the police investigating. They found a few people called Xiao Zhe, but none of the information matched. She could only ask the police to investigate again, but no one believed her. She didn't have a photo, and she couldn't find a witness to prove what she said. Everyone only treated her as a child. After that, she was brought back to town by her parents. She kept begging her parents to let her find her dear brother. But Lin City was so big. Even the police said that there was no one, so her parents wouldn't care. No one believed her words, and no one listened to them. Even if she wanted to find her dear brother, no one would help her. Most importantly, after running away from home this time, Shi Mengwan's mother was scared by her. She even ignored the fact that she only had 2 daughters and ran to have a vasectomy. She said that she wouldn't have a 3rd child and used this to beg her not to leave home again. In the end, Shi Mengwan had no choice but to listen to her parents and stop thinking about coming to Lin City to find her dear brother. However, she couldn't restrain her longing for Xiao Zhe. Every night, every sunrise, every festival. She would think of the young man who protected her behind him. That kind of longing didn't fade with the passage of time. Instead, it became clearer and deeper. She missed him crazily. However, she didn't expect that when they met again, the two of them would reach such a stage. Her dear brother had changed his name and was no longer the same person. Not only did he not care for her at all, but he also hurt her again and again. Jean Hauze looked at Shi Mengwan, who was sleeping on the bed, and a flash of guilt flashed through his eyes. He lost control yesterday, and in the end, Shi Mengwan fell sick. Her body was already wet, and he was so reckless. In the end, she fainted because of him. Even though he dealt with it in time, wiped her hair clean and cleaned her body, Shi Mengwan still fell sick. He called her to call the doctor. She had a high fever of 39 degrees. The doctor gave her an injection to reduce the fever, but her temperature didn't drop immediately. After the doctor left, Jean Hauze went to the bathroom and wrung a towel over her head. The towel was wet and dry, cold and hot. However, Shi Mengwan didn't wake up. During this period, Xiao Ji and Xiao Qiu from her studio called to look for her. Jean Hauze picked up the phone and didn't care how they would react when they heard a man answer Shi Mengwan's call. He directly said that Shi Mengwan was sick and couldn't go to work for the time being. Jean Hauze called Tang Hua again and asked him to send the work over. After hanging up the phone, he sat down by the bed and his gaze fell on Shi Mengwan. Her face was abnormally red because of the fever. Her breathing was also a little heavy. Even though she was asleep, her brows were tightly furrowed. "Dear brother," in a daze, he seemed to hear her murmuring. When he got closer, he could hear clearly that she was calling out, "Dear brother." Jean Hauze's eyes were deep. He reached out his hand and gently caressed Shi Mengwan's cheek. The fever was intense, and the temperature was much higher than usual. The moment his hand touched it, perhaps because Shi Mengwan felt waves of coolness, her furrowed brows even relaxed a lot. "Dear brother," Shi Mengwan felt like she had had a long dream. In the dream, she wasn't forced to separate from her dear brother. There weren't those hooligans who came looking for trouble, and there wasn't Jean Hauze who made her sad. There was only her dear brother who had always been by her side and protected her. She dreamed that she had opened a studio and set up a company. She dreamed that her dear brother had started a business with her. She dreamed that they had been together since they were young. She also dreamed that she and her dear brother had finally gotten married and walked into the auditorium together. But on their wedding day, just when she was about to marry her dear brother, Chen Feifei rushed out of nowhere. "Brother, how is mine, you shameless mistress? You stole my man. You're shameless. You're despicable." The wedding became noisy because of Chen Feifei's arrival. All the guests who came to watch the ceremony looked at them as if they were watching a farce. I'm not a mistress. She was the one who met Jean Hauze first. How did she become a mistress? Shi Mengwan was shocked. She wanted to defend herself, but no one listened to her. She saw her parents' disappointed faces and the shocked expressions of her friends and relatives. Even her best friend, Su Qingseng, looked at her with pity. "Panwan, give up on him. Give up on him." Those voices and those people's gazes were like knives that made her feel a lot of pain. "Don't?" She woke up with a scream, but found that her hands and feet were weak. Not only that, but her entire body was covered in sweat. She looked as if she had been fished out of the water. "You're awake." A hoarse male voice sounded. She turned her head and saw Jean Hauze guarding by the bed. He didn't look very well. There were faint bruises on his chin, and his eyes were bloodshot. Seeing him, Shi Mengwan also recalled why he was here. "You," as soon as she spoke, her voice was very hoarse. Jean Hauze brought over a cup of warm water at the right time, helped her up, and fed her to drink it. She wanted to refuse, but her body, which had just had a fever, really didn't have much strength. Her throat was uncomfortable, so she couldn't refuse. She drank all the water in the cup. The warm water entering her throat finally made her feel better. She looked up at Jean Hauze again. "Are you hungry? There's porridge in the kitchen. It's hot. Let me bring it over for you." Jean Hauze's voice could be considered gentle. Shi Mengwan looked at him. Before she could stop him, he had already gone to bring the porridge. Shi Mengwan was really hungry. She naturally didn't know that she had slept for 2 whole days from the time she woke up from her fever. She didn't usually get sick, so when she got sick, her reaction was very severe. Zhang Haoze brought the porridge in. He helped Shi Mengwan sit up and scooped a spoonful of porridge into Shi Mengwan's mouth. Shi Mengwan tilted her head and avoided his hand. Zhang Haoze, her voice was hoarse and she looked rather powerless. Why haven't you left yet? Eat the porridge first. The spoon in Zhang Haoze's hand was still there. You've been sick for 2 days. You have to eat. Shi Mengwan's brows were tightly furrowed. With her current condition, he could naturally guess that she was sick. She didn't forget who the culprit was that caused her illness. Zhang Haoze, I don't want to see you. Get out. She hadn't recovered from her illness, and her voice and face were all weak. When she said this, she didn't have any aura at all. Zhang Haoze still maintained his previous posture. Drink the porridge first. We'll talk after you finish. You leave first. I'll naturally drink after you leave. Shi Mengwan turned her face away and stubbornly refused to drink. You drink first. I'll naturally leave after you finish. Zhang Haoze's words made Shi Mengwan angry. She couldn't help but glare at him. However, even if she was healthy, she definitely wouldn't be able to suppress him in terms of aura, not to mention that she was sick now. You? As soon as she opened her mouth, Zhang Haoze fed the spoon in his hand into her mouth. She couldn't say anything. She was forced to swallow the porridge in her mouth. Before she could speak again, the second spoon had already been fed to her. Just like that, Shi Mengwan finished the bowl of porridge under half-forced circumstances. When she saw the bottom of the porridge, she also recovered some energy. I finished it. Can you leave now? Zhang Haoze put down the bowl and wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he took out a tissue from the bedside table to wipe Shi Mengwan's mouth. Shi Mengwan avoided his actions. Zhang Haoze, I really don't want to see you. Zhang Haoze's hand that was holding the tissue stopped in midair. Shi Mengwan's gaze was fixed on an unknown point in front of her. Her head was still a little dizzy, and her body was also soft. She couldn't exert any strength. However, there were some things that she had to say. You already have Chen Feifei. Why are you still looking for me? Not giving him a chance, she smiled bitterly. Yes, you want to say that you and Chen Feifei aren't that kind of relationship. You want me to believe you and give you time, right? But why should I believe you? Why should I give you time? You and she can appear in front of everyone. You and she can stand under the sun and receive everyone's blessings. But what about me and you? Zhang Haoze, what can I do with you? For example, on an occasion like yesterday, do you dare to introduce me as your girlfriend to everyone? Do you dare? She finally looked at him. Her voice was slightly hoarse and her eyes were dim. You don't dare. Zhang Haoze's brows were tightly furrowed. He opened his mouth to speak, but Shi Mengwan didn't give him a chance. You don't dare to let people know that I'm your girlfriend. You don't dare to let people know that there's a relationship between us. You can go out with Chen Feifei, but you can't see me go out with other men. You humiliated me and hurt me. Zhang Haoze, I'm a human being, not a doll. After saying so much in one breath, Shi Mengwan's breathing was a little ragged. She placed one hand on her chest and kept calming herself down. Zhang Haoze, the past. I can treat it as my mistake. It's my mistake. I gave you the chance to hurt me again and again. But I've already paid the price. Zhang Haoze, can you let me go? Her face was pale and she looked pitiful and weak. She was completely different from her usual bright and charming self. Zhang Haoze felt his heart tremble. He looked at Shi Mengwan and couldn't react for a moment. His surprise fell into Shi Mengwan's eyes. She thought that he still didn't want to let go just like that, and her eyes were a little red. Zhang Haoze, I'm really tired, very tired. I don't want to continue. Can I? You don't want me to fall out with you, do you? It was rare for her to be so stubborn. I think if Chen Feifei finds out about our relationship, she'll probably be unhappy, right? Zhang Haoze's expression changed slightly. He thought of Chen Feifei's usual methods. What happened to that Ling Shui from before? If that happened to Shi Mengwan, he suddenly didn't dare to think any further. Shi Mengwan saw that his face was pale and knew that he definitely didn't dare to let Chen Feifei know. The corners of her lips curled up, and she smiled mockingly. You can go. Sure, Mengwan was really uncomfortable. She felt tired and uncomfortable. She shrank back into the blanket and turned her face away. She didn't look at John Hauser. I'm very tired. I want to rest. She closed her eyes. In fact, after sleeping for 2 days, she didn't want to sleep now, but she didn't want to see him even more. The room was very quiet. She didn't move, and John Hauser didn't move either. She could feel that he was still sitting there, and she felt uncomfortable. She wanted to chase him away. But she knew that she didn't have the strength now, and she wasn't his match. Many thoughts flashed through her mind, from when she was young until now. From when she reunited with John Hauser until now. Finally, there was that dream. Chen Feifei pointed at her nose and scolded her for being a shameless mistress dream. Her eyes were a little sore, and she felt a little uncomfortable. She resisted the urge to rub her eyes, but in the next second, she felt an extremely gentle kiss on her forehead. Chapter 685. Her body immediately stiffened to the extreme, and she didn't dare to move at all. How could someone like Jean Hauser say something like sorry? For a moment, she thought there was something wrong with her ears. How was that possible? She must have heard wrongly. It must have been. While her thoughts were running wild, her hand was wrapped by a thick and warm palm. The kiss that was as soft as a feather fell again. This time, it fell on her eyelids. I'm sorry. Those 3 very soft words sounded again. This time, they were even clearer than before. She didn't dare to move, but her trembling eyelashes betrayed her current emotions. She forced herself not to open her eyes. The excessive restraint made her hands clench into fists by her side, and her eyes were a little sore. But it was only for a moment. After thinking for a while, she suddenly opened her eyes and met Jean Hauser's. Their eyes met, and Shi Mingwan's almond-shaped eyes were cold. Jean Hauser, I don't need you to say sorry. I just want you to leave this place. Her voice was very soft, but her gaze was very firm. She really didn't want to continue being entangled with him like this. You can go. Shi Mingwan said those 3 extremely calm words. Half of it was because she was sick, and the other half was because she was tired. She should have ended this entanglement long ago. It was just that she really missed it too much, and she was too greedy for the warmth and care that her dear brother had brought her. Jean Hauser didn't answer her. He pulled the blanket higher for her. You're still sick. Rest first. Jean Hauser, don't you understand? Shi Mingwan looked at him with a look of resistance. With you here, I can't rest well at all. Jean Hauser's brows furrowed again. Just as he was about to speak, his phone rang. He picked it up without thinking much. Shi Mingwan was so sick that she was in a daze. She didn't react at first when she heard the familiar ringtone. It wasn't until the word, Auntie, rang in her ears that her eyes widened like thunder. She wanted to sit up, but Jean Hauser was already talking to Mother Shi on the other end of the phone. Auntie? Shi Mingwan almost didn't dare to imagine her mother's reaction on the other end of the phone. Jean Hauser. She lowered her voice and gestured for Jean Hauser to return the phone to her. I'm Jean Hauser, Wanwan's boyfriend. Jean Hauser looked into her eyes and said firmly. Shi Mingwan covered her eyes with one hand. She's still sleeping. Yeah, I caught a cold when I came back yesterday. Jean Hauser had been answering Shi Mingwan's calls for the past few days. It was just that she didn't have many phone calls. Previously, Xiaoji had called because she had called too many times. Jean Hauser knew that it was a call from the studio, so he answered it for her. Shi Mingwan originally thought that she could escape for a while, but Jean Hauser's words made her fall into great despair. Yes, it's my fault. I didn't take good care of her. Shi Mingwan raised her head and glared at Jean Hauser. She hated his shameless behavior to the extreme. Should I ask her to answer the phone? All right. I'll ask her to call you back when she wakes up. He didn't know what Mother Shi said on the other end of the phone. Jean Hauser glanced at Shi Mingwan. Hey, this weekend, right? I will definitely pay them a visit. Jean Hauser. Shi Mingwan's lips moved, and she almost screamed. She was shocked by Zhang Hao's shamelessness. She even forgot about his self-introduction. He said he was her boyfriend? Shi Mengwan didn't have time to think about Zhang Hao's words. She was already shocked by his next words. Thank you, Andy. Don't worry, I'll bring Wanwan back with me. Goodbye. As soon as Zhang Hao hung up, Shi Mengwan ignored her weak body from just being sick and suddenly went forward to grab it. She glared at him. Her body was still weak, but she raised her hand and pointed at the tip of his nose. You, who allowed you to agree? This was too much, really too much. She was so angry that she didn't expect Zhang Hao to do this. Compared to her anger, Zhang Hao was much calmer. Auntie said that she asked me to bring you home this weekend. I don't want to. Shi Mengwan didn't want her parents or family to know about her relationship with Zhang Hao at all. Zhang Hao, get out. If you want to go back, go back. I won't go home with you. Not only would she not go home with him, but she even wanted to beat him up now. I'll go back? Zhang Hao nodded and didn't seem to object. All right, then I'll choose a time to visit auntie and uncle. Zhang Hao. Shi Mengwan threw her phone to the side and reached out to grab Zhang Hao's sleeve. What exactly do you want? Didn't I say? Accompany you home to meet your parents? Meet my parents? In what capacity? Your boyfriend. Shi Mengwan nodded. My boyfriend? Are you sure? Yes. There was nothing to be uncertain about. You're my boyfriend. Who is Chen Feifei to you? Zhang Hao's expression didn't change, but a complicated look flashed across his eyes. She's nothing. Nothing at all? Isn't she your legitimate fiancé? I'm not engaged to her. That was just a one-sided agreement between Chen Yongchang and Chen Feifei. He didn't agree. If he could, he even wanted to pull out and retreat. But now wasn't the time. Shi Mengwan smiled, but that smile didn't reach her eyes. Ordinary people change their hearts, but they say that the hearts of old friends change easily. For the first time, she didn't refute his words, but the meaning revealed in it was enough. Zhang Hao looked at her and reached out to hold her hand, but she avoided it. You go. Wanwan. Zhang Hao wasn't angry at her attitude. If I leave, who will accompany you home? Shi Mengwan chuckled. She didn't seem surprised by his question at all. I don't need you to accompany me. I'll tell my mother that we broke up. Zhang Hao's face darkened because of her words. He didn't speak and just looked at her. It was rare for Shi Mengwan not to back down. She just looked at him. Their gazes met in the air, and neither of them was willing to back down. Shi Mengwan swallowed her saliva and forced herself to calm down. Zhang Hao, you said you wanted to accompany me home. You said you wanted to accompany me to see my family. Do you know what it means for you to go home with me? Shi Mengwan's voice was a little hoarse. Her head was still a little dizzy, and her body was also soft. She couldn't exert any strength. If you go home with me, it means that you're willing to separate our identities. It means that you're willing to marry me and marry me. Zhang Hao, she stared into his eyes, and the mockery on her lips was hard to hide. Are you sure? She didn't believe him at all. He knew. Zhang Hao suddenly reached out and held her hand. Your body hasn't fully recovered yet. You should rest first. Zhang Hao, if there's anything, we'll talk about it after you recover. Don't avoid the topic. I won't let you accompany me back to see my parents. You should sleep first. As Zhang Hao spoke, he touched her forehead with his hand. There's still a little fever. I might need another injection. Zhang Hao, you rest first. I still have some business to deal with. When I'm done, I'll come and accompany you. Zhang Hao, no matter what Shi Mengwan said, Zhang Hao just didn't answer her question. She felt that all her strength was like hitting cotton, and it didn't have any effect. She was only concerned about being angry at Zhang Hao's words, but she didn't notice that Zhang Hao was much gentler to her today than before. He was also more talkative, and his face and voice were full of gentleness. Unfortunately, Shi Mengwan's mood wasn't right, so she didn't realize this at all. In the end, Shi Mengwan couldn't chase Zhang Hao out of her apartment. Her constitution had always been very good, and she rarely got sick. Therefore, she never knew that her occasional illness would be so serious. After Jean Hauser walked over, she fell asleep again because she was too tired. In a daze, she felt that someone had been guarding her. The towel on her forehead was changed every now and then, and she felt much more comfortable. She actually knew in her heart that the person guarding her was Jean Hauser, but so what? Nothing would happen between her and him. However, she didn't expect that after sleeping for one night, the next day, the sky had changed. Yesterday, Jean Hauser told Mother Sure that she was sick. Mother Sure was extremely worried. Although she had never heard of the name Jean Hauser, she was worried because she had never heard of him. Sure Mengwan never told her what she did outside or who she met. She felt that Xiao Qi was quite nice to her, but Sure Mengwan didn't like him. She was really anxious. It wasn't that it had to be Xiao Qi. But if Xiao Qi could even agree to the condition of marrying into her family, then he would definitely treat Sure Mengwan well in the future, right? What about this Jean Hauser? Where did he come from? How did they meet? How long had they been together? What did he do? She wanted to know all these questions, but Jean Hauser didn't explain it clearly on the phone. Therefore, after sleeping for a night, Mother Sure, who was overly worried, felt that she couldn't wait for Jean Hauser to bring Sure Mengwan home on the weekend. The next morning, the people in town happened to be driving to Lin City. After Mother Sure packed up, she told Father Sure to stay at home and take care of Sure Mingru. After all, Sure Mengwan was in the 3rd year of junior high. Mother Sure, who was about to take the high school entrance examination, didn't want her daughter to be distracted at all. She had been to Sure Mengwan's apartment before. Usually, when she had nothing to do, she would get someone to deliver things to Sure Mengwan. So she went straight to her door. When she came, Sure Mengwan had just woken up. Jean Hauser asked someone to cook porridge. Yesterday, it was plain porridge. Today, he asked someone to cook fish porridge. It was light and nutritious. It's still a little hot. Be careful. Jean Hauser brought the porridge to Sure Mengwan, but Sure Mengwan didn't appreciate it at all. I'm not eating. Take it away. Sure Mengwan, who had slept for 2 days in a row, finally recovered a little. Although she still didn't have much strength, she could get out of bed. Get out. 1-1. Jean Hauser placed the porridge on the bedside table. The expression on his face was rarely gentle, as if he was coaxing a child. You haven't recovered from your illness yet. Eating something light will help you recover. Sure Mengwan looked at Jean Hauser as if he was an alien. This Jean Hauser was completely different from what she remembered. She even wanted to ask him if he was possessed. Come, I'll feed you. As Jean Hauser spoke, he picked up the bowl of porridge and scooped a spoonful into her mouth. Sure Mengwan looked at him like this, but without thinking, she waved her hand. Jean Hauser wasn't prepared for Sure Mengwan's attack, and the porridge in his hand flew out. The bowl shattered, and the porridge splashed all over the ground. Some of it even splashed onto Jean Hauser's body. There was silence in the air. Sure Mengwan didn't expect herself to do such a thing, and she was stunned for a moment. However, she didn't feel that she had done anything wrong. If he had left earlier and not pretended to be affectionate here, she wouldn't have done such a thing. She thought so in her heart, but it was difficult for her to maintain her calm expression. She could only turn her face to the side and force herself not to look at him. Jean Hauser looked at Sure Mengwan like this. His gaze was deep and his expression was a little complicated. His deep eyes couldn't tell what he was thinking for a moment. Sure Mengwan waited for a long time, but she didn't hear Jean Hauser leave in a huff. She couldn't help but quietly turn her face. Unexpectedly, Jean Hauser squatted down and picked up the fragments on the ground. Sure Mengwan was shocked again. She wanted to chase him away again, but she saw the obvious stains on his clothes. She lowered her head again, thinking about how to get rid of Jean Hauser, and how to make him never bother her again. It was at this time that Mother Sure came. When there was a knock on the door, Sure Mengwan was shocked. Who would come to her place at this time? It couldn't be Su Qingseng. She was in Lin City. Could it be Little Ji? Or could it be Tong Yen and Little Chiu? Sure Mengwan didn't want them to see Jean Hauser. She wanted to get out of bed in a hurry, but Jean Hauser pressed her body down. Don't move. There are fragments on the ground. Don't hurt your feet. Go away. Sure Mengwan couldn't sit still. I don't need you to care. Just because there were fragments here didn't mean there were fragments on the other side. Shi Mengwan stubbornly wanted to get out of bed, but Zhang Haoze forcefully pressed her body down. Don't move. He glared at her. Her stubbornness really gave him a headache. If you don't want me to do anything to you, don't move. You're shameless. I'll go open the door. As Zhang Haoze spoke, he stood up straight and walked out. You're not allowed to go. Shi Mengwan wanted to stop him, but her voice didn't have any momentum at all. Secondly, it was too late for her to stop him in this situation. When Zhang Haoze saw Mother Shi standing at the door, he recognized her as Shi Mengwan's mother at a glance. Mother Shi was also a great beauty. He could see her demeanor when she was young. Most importantly, she looked somewhat similar to Shi Mengwan. Auntie, you're here? She didn't expect that the person who answered the phone would really be a man. This time, Mother Shi was a little stunned. Even though she had heard it once on the phone, it was another thing to see it with her own eyes. She stood at the door and forgot to enter. She just looked at Zhang Haoze. Why are you here? Where's my daughter? Chapter 686. Mother Shi looked at Zhang Haoze with a probing gaze. Facing her gaze, Zhang Haoze was much calmer. Hello, Auntie. Yes, I'm Zhang Haoze. Wanwan just woke up and is inside. Zhang Haoze took a step back as he spoke and gestured for Mother Shi to enter the door. Mother Shi entered the house, but she wasn't in a hurry to see her daughter. Instead, he sized up Zhang Haoze. Zhang Haoze? She didn't expect Zhang Haoze to be such a handsome young man. Look at his clothes and the way he talks. There was also the feeling that came from his body. Such a man was actually with her daughter? However, Mother Shi's hesitation didn't last long. She was still carrying bags of things in her hands. Zhang Haoze took the initiative to take them and placed them on the coffee table beside him. Auntie, do you want to see Wanwan? Mother Shi decided to see her daughter first. Zhang Haoze followed behind Mother Shi into the room. As soon as he entered the room, he remembered. There was a pile of broken pieces on the ground, as well as the porridge on the ground. That messy scene did not look good at all. Zhang Haoze was a little awkward. Mother Shi looked at him and then at Shi Mengwan. Her eyes were instantly on high alert. When Shi Mengwan saw Mother Shi appear, she held her forehead with her hand and felt that it was really over. Why are you here? She hadn't fully recovered from her illness, so her voice sounded weak. Mother Shi was very worried, but looking at the mess on the ground, she went down first. Lie down first. We'll talk later. Mother Shi stepped forward. She was used to cleaning up, even if he wasn't familiar with this place. In just a few moments, the floor was cleaned up. He was afraid that Shi Mengwan would step on the debris when she got down, so he carefully scanned the room and cleaned it completely. Then he sat in front of Shi Mengwan's bed again. After a while, Zhang Haoze scooped another bowl of porridge and placed it on the bedside table. Auntie, you came at the right time. Wanwan hasn't had breakfast yet. Mother Shi was very old. When she saw the mess on the ground, she knew that something had happened between the two of them. She glanced at Zhang Haoze with an unfathomable expression. Mr. Zhang, right? Could you please go out first? I want to talk to Wanwan for a bit. Of course. Zhang Haoze nodded and left after glancing at Shi Mengwan. Only Shi Mengwan and her daughter were left in the room. Mother Shi picked up the bowl of porridge and looked at her daughter with a little heartache. Why are you sick? Why didn't you tell me? Didn't you know that I would be worried? How can people not get sick from eating grains? It's not a big deal. Shi Mengwan reached out to take the bowl, but Mother Shi didn't let her and directly fed her a spoonful of porridge. Mother Shi focused on feeding the porridge, and Shi Mengwan focused on eating the porridge. After a while, she saw the bottom. Shi Mengwan looked like she didn't want to drink anymore, so Mother Shi put down the bowl. Tell me what's going on? Mother Shi pouted and looked outside the door. Nothing, that's all. Shi Mengwan didn't want to say more. She didn't expect Zhang Haoze to pick up her call, nor did she expect Zhang Haoze to be bumped into by Mother Shi. Either way, it was not a situation she wanted to see. She didn't know how to answer her mother's question. Your boyfriend? Why haven't I heard you mention this before? How long have you known each other? Where is he from? What does he do? He even went on a blind date with Xiaoqi during the New Year. At that time, she didn't know this person yet. It seemed like she met him later on. Mom, are you checking my household registration? Shouldn't I check my daughter's boyfriend? If Mother sure didn't see that Shi Mengwan was still sick, she would have poked her in the head to see what she was thinking. Are you going to say it yourself? Or do you want me to go out and ask him? Mom. Shi Mengwan was a little annoyed. She was thinking about breaking up with Zhang Haoze. She had already made up her mind. Who knew that her illness would give Zhang Haoze a chance? It wasn't that she wasn't angry, but she couldn't reveal anything in front of her mother. Mom, his name is Zhang Haoze. I haven't known him for long. He runs a company. Haven't known him for long? Mother sure wasn't an idiot. You haven't known him for long, and you've already let him enter the house? Are you living together? Mom. Shi Mengwan's face was red. She was too embarrassed to answer. Can you stop asking? How can I not ask? Tell me, this child. Mother Shi was also anxious. Ever since Shi Mengwan was young, other than the time she ran away from home, she had never worried about her. She also knew that Shi Mengwan had always been proud. The last time she said that in front of Grandma Shi, she probably had to do it. But looking at Zhang Haoze, how could he look like a man who was willing to marry into the family and let his child take someone else's surname? Shi Mengwan probably couldn't control such a man. Mengwan, what's going on with you? Mother Shi was referring to the mess when she came in. Why did these two people look a little off? Mom, can you leave it alone? Shi Mengwan was really annoyed. She wanted to get rid of Zhang Haoze, but she didn't know that not only did she not get rid of him, but she also got herself deeper and deeper into it. It wasn't easy for her to make up her mind, but who knew that such a thing would happen again? You child. Shi Mengwan had been stubborn since she was young. Mother Shi wanted to say a few words to her, but she knew that this child couldn't be too serious. If you don't want to say it, then you can rest first. What do you want to eat for lunch? Mom will make it for you. Anything. Shi Mengwan really didn't mean to go against Mother Shi, but she was also in a mess right now. She really didn't know what to say. Mother Shi looked at her and sighed silently. She took the bowl and went out. Zhang Haoze was in the living room. He seemed to be on the phone. Hearing Mother Shi come out, he hung up the phone. Mother Shi put the bowl in the kitchen and looked at the kitchen. There was no smell of smoke. It seemed that they didn't cook much. Zhang Haoze stood at the kitchen door. Auntie, have you eaten? I've eaten. Mother Shi looked in the direction of the living room. Zhang Haoze understood and the two of them walked outside together. Mother Shi sat down on the sofa and gestured for Zhang Haoze to sit down as well. Compared to usual, Zhang Haoze was sitting very upright. His hands were on his knees, and he looked like he was sitting upright. Mother Shi's brows twitched slightly, and she sized up Zhang Haoze again. Her eyes were long and deep. Although she tried her best to restrain herself when she looked at people, she was still very imposing. Mother Shi was from a small town. The most powerful person she had seen in the past was only the county head of their county. Today, when she saw Zhang Haoze, she had a feeling that the person in front of her wasn't an ordinary person. How old is Mr. Zhang this year? Auntie, just call me Haoze. I'm 29 years old this year. Where does Mr. Zhang work? Mother Shi didn't answer him. This form of address was still a little unfamiliar and polite. I've opened 2 small companies of my own. In addition, I also have a small business under my name. Zhang Haoze spoke modestly, but Mother Shi wasn't as relaxed as he thought. Instead, her gaze became more and more wary and distant. Shi Mengwan had been beautiful since she was young. She was afraid that the man in front of her had bad intentions. When did Mr. Zhang and Wanwan meet? I've known Wanwan for a long time. Mother Shi was stunned for a moment. She recalled what Shi Mengwan had said to her before. You've known each other for a long time? But Wanwan didn't have a boyfriend during the New Year. If she didn't know that Shi Mengwan didn't have a boyfriend, why would she arrange for her to go on a blind date with Xiaoqi? I met Wanwan last year, but we only got together recently. In other words, you haven't been together for long? Zhang Haoze didn't avoid Mother Shi's question. Instead, he was quite calm. I haven't been together for a long time, but I feel that two people aren't together based on the length of time. Some people don't understand each other even after being together for a lifetime. But some people can hit it off at first sight. It can be seen that the depth of a relationship can't be measured by the length of time they've known each other. What do you think? Mother Sure reluctantly accepted Jean House's explanation, but she asked, "Then, according to Mr. Jean, you're sincere about Wan?" Jean House nodded. His answer was extremely firm. Mother Sure's expression was a little more relaxed than before. Her gaze fell on Jean House and swept across him. Finally, as if she had made up her mind, she spoke softly. "Mr. Jean, has Wan told you about our family's situation? I wonder what you're referring to, Auntie? I don't think Wan will tell you. Since that's the case, I'll tell you." Mother Sure's greatest regret in her life was that she didn't have a son, but after having two daughters, that regret wasn't a regret anymore. In her heart, nothing could compare to her two daughters. "My husband, Wan's father, is the eldest in the family. There are two more brothers. After I married her father, I only gave birth to Wan and her younger sister. When I gave birth to Wan's younger sister, Wan's grandmother was very unhappy and wanted me to send Wan's younger sister away to give birth to another son. At that time, Wan was very unhappy. Because of this, she even ran away from home to protest." Jean House's eyes darkened when he heard this, but it was only for a moment. Soon, he sat there expressionlessly and listened to Mother Sure. "After she ran away from home, her father and I slowly got over it. What son? How can he be more important than a daughter?" When Mother Sure said this, she thought of her daughter's wandering time outside for more than a year, and her expression didn't look good. "After Wan returned home, her father and I also gave up on the idea of having another child. It's just that we don't want to have another child, but Wan's grandmother doesn't think so." She briefly recounted what Sure Mengwan said when Grandmother Sure came looking for her that day. Mother Sure had been paying attention to Jean House's expression. "That's how it is." Jean House was expressionless, and Mother Sure couldn't figure out what he was thinking. Wan agreed. If she finds a partner and asks the male lead to marry into her family, the child she gives birth to will have Wan's surname. Mother Sure paused for a moment and realized that Jean House was still expressionless. She could only continue, "I know that a normal man wouldn't agree to such a condition. I don't mean anything else by saying so much. I just want to say that if you agree, then you can continue dating Wan. If you don't agree, I think you should just forget about your relationship. After all, if time passes and your relationship deepens, everyone will be in pain." Mother Sure had never taken what Sure Mengwan said that day seriously. She had never thought of letting Sure Mengwan marry into her family. She had even thought that if Sure Mengwan met a man she really liked one day, and the other party really wouldn't agree to her conditions, for the sake of Sure Mengwan's happiness, she was willing to take a step back and adopt her brother-in-law's child. She was very open-minded. She had no objections to what kind of man Sure Mengwan found and what kind of man she was with. It was just that she saw Jean House today. Such a man was definitely not her ideal son-in-law. The most important thing was the mess she saw just now. Her daughter had never been an unreasonable person. She wouldn't make a fuss until the porridge was knocked over. No matter who started it first, it meant that the couple was in conflict now. Her daughter was her flesh and blood, so she would always protect her. That was why she wanted to say what Sure Mengwan said. It was for no other reason than to make things difficult for Jean House. Jean House hadn't said anything, so Mother Sure couldn't tell what she felt. There was disappointment, and there was also bitterness. Her daughter was good in every way, but Jean House wasn't willing to answer her, which made her feel a little dissatisfied. At this point, if Mr. Jean can't make a decision, why don't we just let it go? After all, if they're not suitable, forcing them to be together will only increase each other's pain. Moreover, with Mr. Jean's talent, I believe that Mr. Jean won't have to worry about not being able to find a partner. "Auntie." Jean House finally spoke. "I know everything you said. I think there's no problem." "Huh?" It was Mother Sure's turn to be stunned. What do you mean?" "I mean, I agree to marry into your family." I don't mind giving birth to a child with the surname Sher. Mother Sher's mouth was wide open. She suddenly realized that she had lost her composure. She cleared her throat. Mr. Jean is a man. He doesn't want to make random promises to make an old woman like me happy. Auntie, I'm not making random promises. I'm serious. Jean House's voice wasn't loud, but his sincere words made Mother Sher speechless. Can Mr. Jean take responsibility for what he said? Of course. A man's words can't be taken back. Since I dared to promise you, I can naturally take responsibility for what I said. Mother Sher, who didn't expect such an answer, finally looked at Jean House differently. She thought for a moment and couldn't help but speak. When I came in just now, I saw the porridge spilled. Can I ask what happened? Jean House didn't seem surprised by Mother Sher's question. It's my fault. Wanwan has been with me for a long time, but I haven't brought her to see my family. Wanwan might be unhappy because of this. Mother Sher didn't completely believe Jean House's words. Then why didn't you bring Wanwan to see your family? Jean House was silent. He crossed his hands on his knees and lowered his eyes, as if he found it difficult to speak. My mother has already passed away. After my mother passed away, my father married someone else. Then, my relationship with my father wasn't good. So, Jean House didn't finish his sentence, but Mother Sher seemed to understand what he meant. I see. Yes. Jean House looked up at Mother Sher. In fact, I know about Wanwan's knot, but I'm not close to my father. So, I don't think my father has to participate in my life's important matters. Mother Sher nodded as if she could understand Jean House's thoughts. That's true, but he's your family after all. It's better to talk about some things properly. I will. Jean House nodded as if he didn't object to Mother Sher's words. At this moment, Mother Sher felt some sympathy for Jean House. His biological mother died early and his father married someone else. As the saying goes, if you have a stepmother, you will have a stepfather. Since Jean House's father married someone else, he couldn't be very good to Jean House. This way, it was normal for Jean House to have a knot in his heart and not want to bring Sher Mengwan home. She knew her daughter's temper a little. She was afraid that Sher Mengwan would feel that Jean House didn't value her. In this way, it wasn't entirely Jean House's responsibility. House, I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. Wanwan has had a bad temper since she was young. Both her father and I spoil her too much, and we spoil her rotten. Since you can even accept the condition of marrying into the family, it means that you're sincere to Wanwan. I believe that since Wanwan let you marry into the family, it means that she also has feelings for you. Since that's the case, you two should get along well. You should understand each other. In just a short while, Mother Sher had even changed the way she addressed him. It was obvious that she had already confirmed Jean House's feelings. Jean House's expression didn't change, but he felt much more relaxed. Auntie, don't worry. I know. Mother Sher nodded. Although having such a son-in-law wasn't part of her plan, it really gave birth to a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. The more she looked at him, the more interesting it became. Looking at the time, she stood up. I brought some local specialties from home. Is House still going out today? No need. Jean House wouldn't say that he still had a bunch of company matters to deal with. Mother Sher was satisfied. She nodded. Okay, I'll go buy some groceries. Let's have lunch together. This was considered as acknowledging Jean House's identity. How can I let Auntie buy groceries? Let's go out for lunch. Wanwan likes to eat the food I cook. Besides, Wanwan hasn't recovered from her illness, so it's not suitable for her to go out for those oily foods. Then I'll go buy groceries? Jean House stood up as well. Mother Sher looked at his eager expression and couldn't help but laugh. No need, you accompany Wanwan. I've been here before, so I know where the market is. As she spoke, she pouted and looked in the direction of the room. Wanwan seems to still be angry. Go coax her. She has a bad temper. Since you've decided to be with her, be more tolerant. I will. Don't worry, Auntie. Chapter 687. Jean House wanted to ask Tang Hua to arrange for someone to send her off, but he was afraid that he would scare Mother Sure, so he could only give up after thinking about it. He turned around and went into the room. Shi Mingwan's fever had subsided. It was just that she was still listless and couldn't muster up any energy. After Mother Sure went out, she fell asleep in a daze for a while. Just now, Jean Hauser was chatting with Mother Sure outside. Because the door was closed and the sound wasn't loud, he didn't wake her up. Jean Hauser entered the door and placed his hand on her forehead. After making sure that her fever had subsided and that there was no big problem, he sat down by the bed. He just looked at Shi Mingwan's sleeping face. When she was asleep, she wasn't as beautiful as when she was awake. Because of her illness, her face was pale, making her look delicate and pitiful. His hand unconsciously caressed her cheek as he thought about Mother Sure's words just now. Looking for a son-in-law? This seemed like something Shi Mingwan would say and do. He was a little lost in thought, but his hand didn't move away from Shi Mingwan's face. Shi Mingwan didn't sleep well at first, but now that she felt someone touching her, she naturally thought it was Mother Sure. She wasn't fully awake yet. She rubbed her face against the person's hand and didn't open her eyes. "Mom, I'm so thirsty. Pour me a glass of water." Jean Hauser looked at the dependence she inadvertently revealed. It was something she didn't have when facing him. He retracted his hand and looked at her deeply. He got up and went out to pour water. He poured water in. One hand was placed behind her, as if to help her up. Shi Mingwan yawned and still had her eyes closed. She drank half of the water from the hand that the other party handed over, but she suddenly realized that something was wrong. Her mother didn't have the strength to support her body with one hand and feed her water with the other. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked at the person. When she realized that it was Jean Hauser, her eyes widened. "Why is it you? Where's my mom? Didn't he leave?" When she went out, she was still thinking that her mother would see her half-hearted attitude. She would definitely chase him away. She didn't expect him to not leave. "Your mom went to buy groceries. She said that you like her cooking." Jean Hauser put the cup aside and sat down by the bed. Shi Mingwan sat up straight, avoided his hand, and moved herself a little to the side. "Why are you still here? Don't you have to work? You're sick." Her lifeless appearance yesterday scared him, so he asked Tang Hua to bring some urgent business matters here. "Who am I sick because of? Who did this to me?" Shi Mingwan's words were quite impolite. Jean Hauser revealed a rare trace of embarrassment. The reason why she was sick was indeed because of him. If he hadn't messed around in the bathroom, she wouldn't have gotten sick. Shi Mingwan looked at the expression on his face and thought that he was feeling guilty. She sneered and said, "I'm almost recovered. My mother is also here. There's nothing else for you to do. You can go." Jean Hauser didn't leave as she wished. "Auntie went to buy groceries and asked me to stay and take care of you." "Thank you, but it's okay." Shi Mingwan looked reluctant. "With you here, I won't be able to recover. If you really want me to be well, hurry up and leave. Auntie asked me to have lunch together." Shi Mingwan couldn't help but look at him. "Jean Hauser, what did you say to my mother? Tell me." Mother Sure actually asked him to stay for lunch? This revealed too much information. "Nothing. I just told your mother that I agreed to your conditions." "Her conditions? What conditions?" Shi Mingwan never thought that Jean Hauser would agree to marry into her family, nor did she think that he would be willing to let his child have the surname Sure. Therefore, when she suddenly heard this sentence, she was confused. "Your mother told me that if I want to be with you, I want to marry into your family, and I want the child to have the surname Sure." Shi Mingwan's mouth was wide open. She looked at Jean Hauser and for a moment, she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. "Jean Hauser, do you know what you're saying?" "I know." "You want to marry into my family? Are you sure?" "Yes." It was just a surname, so Jean Hauser didn't care. Moreover, that matter was too far away, so he didn't have the mood to think about it now. Shi Mingwan suddenly reached out and pulled the front of Jean Hauser's shirt over. She didn't have much strength. If it weren't for Jean Hauser's cooperation, she probably wouldn't have been able to pull him in front of her. She just stared at him, her gaze weak but sharp. "Jean Hauser, do you know what you're saying?" Jean Hauser went to pull her hand. "You haven't recovered yet. Don't worry about these things for now. Rest well. Jean Hausa, answer my question. Do you know what you're saying? You want to marry into my family? Does this mean that you want to marry me? Her eyes were filled with suspicion and mockery. She just looked at him like that, not believing what he said at all. Two consecutive affirmative answers didn't soften Shermingwan's attitude at all. She looked at Jean Hausa, and the expression on her face became sharper. What about Chen Feifei? If you want to marry me, what will she do? Jean Hausa's expression didn't change. He seemed to dislike hearing Chen Feifei's name very much. Our matter has nothing to do with her, and you don't need to think about her. Don't need to think about Chen Feifei? And then? The entire Lin City knew that Jean Hausa and Chen Feifei were engaged. Now that Jean Hausa said that he wanted to marry her, wasn't he making her a third party who intervened in other people's relationships? Jean Hausa, you don't understand at all. He might have some feelings for her and liked her, but he wouldn't understand her perspective, her thoughts, and her worries. I've said it before. You don't need to think about those things. Jean Hausa, you're so selfish. Her words were sarcastic, but Jean Hausa wasn't moved at all. He looked at the sharp side of her. It was rare for her to be like this. He didn't know if it was because Mother Shi came. The Shi Mengwan in front of him was much more confident. This was how people were. With someone to rely on, they would always be different. He reached out to pull Shi Mengwan's hand over and held it in his palm. He looked at her with a deep gaze. Wan, you can also be more selfish. He didn't like her to think about Chen Feifei, and he didn't like her to worry too much. It was enough for him to worry about those things. She didn't need to think about them at all. Just like Grandma Shi's words and actions, she could actually completely ignore them. She would only tire herself out by doing this. Shi Mengwan pulled her hand back, and her face was cold. Jean Hausa, I'm not you. There are some things that I will never be able to do, and I will never be as carefree as you. Wan, get out. Shi Mengwan refused to communicate with him anymore. She didn't want to look at him either. Wan. Jean Hausa wanted to say something, but Mother Shi had already returned. When she left, she took the key from the porch, entered the door, and put the dishes in the kitchen. She planned to go to the room to see how Shi Mengwan was doing, but she realized that the atmosphere between the two of them didn't seem to be very good. Mother Shi looked at Shi Mengwan and then at Jean Hausa. Her gaze wandered between the two of them. Seeing her mother return, Shi Mengwan didn't show any dissatisfaction on her face. She was about to get up, but Mother Shi quickly stopped her. You should continue to rest. I'll go cook. It's all your favorite food. You guys wait for a while. You can eat later. It was almost noon. Mother Shi was afraid that her daughter would starve, so she gave a few instructions and went into the kitchen. As soon as Mother Shi left, Shi Mengwan wanted to chase Jean Hausa away. However, her phone rang at this moment. This time, she didn't give Jean Hausa a chance and went to pick up the phone herself. Jean Hausa glanced at her, then got up and went outside. Mother Shi had just finished washing the rice when Jean Hausa came in. He rolled up the sleeves of his shirt to his elbows. Auntie, let me help you. No need. Mother Shi looked at Jean Hausa and knew that he rarely entered the kitchen. I'm used to cooking. I don't need your help. You just need to accompany Wan. Jean Hausa stood still. She's on the phone. You didn't coax her well, did you? Mother Shi took out the vegetables from the bag. Looking at Jean Hausa's expression, she knew that the two of them definitely didn't come to an agreement just now. Hausa, haven't you told Wan about your family situation? Jean Hausa was stunned for a moment. Mother Shi knew from his expression. You should have told Wan. Wan is a tough talker but soft-hearted child. If you told her about your family situation, she definitely wouldn't have messed with you. Mother Shi didn't know the specific situation, but she could understand. There were also such families in their town. The father brought a stepmother into the family. The stepmother didn't treat the child of the ex-wife well. When the child grew up, he wouldn't even recognize the father, let alone recognize the mother. This was all human nature. It was understandable that she couldn't understand it at the moment. However, Shi Mengwan was a little stubborn. If he didn't explain it to her properly, she probably wouldn't understand. Jean Hauser didn't respond, and Mother sure didn't want his help. However, she asked him some questions. Other than your father, do you have any other relatives in your family? I don't have any relatives. Jean Hauser's expression was indifferent. I don't have much contact with them. Mother sure didn't ask anymore. She could understand. If even her father didn't treat her well, she probably wouldn't have the energy to interact with other people. At this moment, Mother Sure's motherly love flared up. She looked at Jean Hauser more and more affectionate. If you don't have any contact with them, then so be it. Pick a time another day and come home with Wanwan. We have many relatives at home. If you really get together with Wanwan in the future, you don't have to be so polite. We'll be your elders. Jean Hauser pursed his lips slightly, and a rare look of emotion flashed across his deep eyes. Although Wanwan's grandmother is a little unreliable, she's actually not a bad person. Although Wanwan's two uncles and aunts have some ulterior motives, they are also good people. You'll know in the future. Grandma Sure had always been the one talking about the adoption. Actually, her two brothers-in-law didn't have any thoughts. After all, they all knew how good Father Sure was to Sure Mengwan and her sister. All right. This dish can be eaten after it's served. Go and call Wanwan to eat. Should we bring it in for her to eat? No need. Although she's sick, don't spoil her too much. How can she be so delicate? Let her get up and move around. She'll recover faster. Mother Sure had never been a person who doted on her children. When Jean Hauser entered the room, Sure Mengwan had just ended the call with Su Qingsang. After Su Qingsang returned to Lin City, she had started working again. However, this time she brought her good news. She was pregnant. This was really good news for Sure Mengwan. She had already agreed to be the godmother of the child in Su Qingsang's stomach. When she heard that Su Qingsang was pregnant, she was extremely happy. The two of them had been married for more than a year, and now they had a child. They were even pregnant with twins. She was really happy for Su Qingsang from the bottom of her heart. She had never given birth, but Su Qingsang was an obstetrician and gynecologist. She didn't need her to teach her anything. However, it didn't affect the two women's excited discussion about the child. Especially when Su Qingsang talked about how the child came about. It was very strange. Hua Jinyao didn't seem to want children. This pregnancy was an accident. Su Qingsang originally thought that Hua Jinyao would want her to abort the child. However, she didn't expect Hua Jinyao to be very happy, even to the point of being silly. Through the phone, Sure Mengwan could feel the happiness that Su Qingsang revealed when she said that. She was very envious. After hanging up the phone, she couldn't help but think of Jean Hauser. If she was pregnant, would dear brother be happy? Thinking of the situation between her and Jean Hauser, she smiled bitterly. It wasn't the same thing at all. If she had a child, it would be really unfortunate. Just as she was thinking this, she looked up and saw Jean Hauser enter the door. She especially didn't like him now. She turned her face away, not wanting to see him at all. It's time to eat. It wasn't that Jean Hauser didn't see the expression on Sure Mengwan's face. His lips were pursed into a straight line, and he looked a little gloomy. Sure Mengwan didn't give him a good look. She got out of bed, but as soon as her feet touched the ground, her body became a little weak. She rarely got sick, but she didn't know that this illness was because she had slept for too long, and her legs were a little weak. Jean Hauser quickly stepped forward and hugged her. The moment his hands hugged her, Sure Mengwan instinctively wanted to struggle. Unfortunately, even if she was healthy, she wasn't a match for him, not to mention that she hadn't recovered from her illness yet. Jean Hauser looked at her still pale little face, but he didn't intend to put her down. He just carried her and walked out. When Sure Mengwan realized what he was going to do, she struggled with all her might. She didn't want her mother to see her like this. Don't move. Jean Hauser whispered in her ear, you don't want to fall either, do you? Sure Mengwan couldn't help but glare at him, but Jean Hauser didn't seem to see her ugly expression. He wasn't afraid that Mother Sure was outside, so he directly carried her to the dining table outside. Mother Sure happened to come out with the soup and was about to put it on the dining table. She suddenly saw her daughter being carried out by Jean Hauser, and the smile on her face became a little playful. Especially when she saw Shi Mengwan staring at Zhang Haoze with deep love, she even said, "You're too much. Don't you have legs? Come down and eat. Put me down." Shi Mengwan glared at Zhang Haoze again, and Zhang Haoze obediently placed her on the dining chair. Mother Shi now felt that Zhang Haoze wasn't bad. With his height and physical strength. What was the saying on the internet now? Yes, boyfriend strength. Not bad, not bad. The smile on her face became even brighter. Shi Mengwan knew what Mother Shi was thinking when she saw her expression, and she was angry again. She couldn't help but glare at Zhang Haoze again. Mother Shi looked at Zhang Haoze, and her gaze was different now. "Haoze, sit down and eat too." "Thank you, Auntie." Zhang Haoze sat down next to Shi Mengwan. Shi Mengwan glanced at him, then got up and moved the chair to the side. Seeing this, Zhang Haoze moved the chair in her direction. Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth and was about to move the chair again. One. Mother Shi couldn't take it anymore. "You're not honest even when you're eating. Do you want me to help you move the chair outside the door?" Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth and glanced at Mother Shi. "Mom, what do you know?" She had a lot to say, but Mother Shi didn't give her a chance. "What's wrong with Haoze? I think Haoze is very good. You really have to change your temper." Shi Mengwan's eyes widened. "What's wrong with my temper?" "Stubborn." Mother Shi unceremoniously criticized her daughter, but when she faced Zhang Haoze, her face was smiling like a flower. "Haoze, Wanwan has been spoiled rotten by her father and me. You have to be more tolerant." As she spoke, she scooped a bowl of soup and placed it in front of Zhang Haoze. Shi Mengwan saw this and was very angry. She couldn't help but reach out and bring the bowl of soup over. "You child." Mother Shi looked at Shi Mengwan and felt that her daughter was a little too much. "It's okay, Annie." Zhang Haoze was quite magnanimous. The more he was like this, the more Mother Shi felt that her daughter was immature. She scooped another bowl of soup and placed it in front of Zhang Haoze. Shi Mengwan resisted the urge to knock the soup away. "Mom, doesn't he have his own hands? Let him scoop it himself." "You child, didn't I help you scoop soup at home? You don't have hands either?" "I'm your daughter." "He's my son-in-law." The bowl in Shi Mengwan's hand almost fell down. She looked at Mother Shi and felt a headache coming on. "Mom, what nonsense are you talking about?" "How am I talking nonsense?" Mother Shi glanced at Zhang Haoze. "Haoze has already agreed to marry into the family. How am I talking nonsense?" "He's lying to you." Shi Mengwan was furious. She couldn't help but glare at Zhang Haoze fiercely. It was all this guy's fault for spouting nonsense in front of her mother. "Mom, don't believe him." "I don't believe him." "Believe you? I think Haoze is pretty good. I think you really have to change your temper. Otherwise, I won't be able to stand you in the future, let alone Haoze." "Mom, am I still your daughter? Why do you always side with outsiders?" "If he becomes my son-in-law, then he won't be an outsider." Mother Shi's expression was matter-of-fact. Shi Mengwan was furious. She watched as Zhang Haoze picked up the bowl in his hand and calmly drank the soup. She couldn't help but feel angry. Without thinking, she snatched the bowl from his hand and placed it on the table. She glared at Zhang Haoze fiercely, not caring about Mother Shi's presence at all. "Zhang Haoze, leave. Go find your fiancé. Don't lie to my mom here." Even if she would shed all pretenses and make Mother Shi unhappy, she couldn't take it anymore. She had no scruples. As soon as she said this, Mother Shi's expression changed. Her gaze was sharp for a moment, and then she looked at Zhang Haoze inquiringly. Chapter 688. Fiancé? What fiancé? The expression on Mother Shi's face changed completely. She looked at Shi Mengwan and finally realized that her daughter did have a temper, but she was definitely not someone who would cause trouble for no reason. "Haoze? What fiancé?" Zhang Haoze looked at Shi Mengwan as if he didn't expect her to talk about such a topic in front of Mother Shi. The corners of Shi Mengwan's lips curled up, and her eyes were filled with disdain. She looked at Zhang Haoze fixedly. She wanted to know how he would explain it in front of her mother. Mr. Jean. Mother Sure saw that Jean Hauser hadn't spoken, so the way she addressed him changed. Jean Hauser glanced at Shi Mengwan and turned to face Mother Sure with a calm expression. I do have a fiancée, but I don't have any feelings for her. And I promised Wan that I would resolve this matter. So you really have a fiancé? Mother Sure only paid attention to the first sentence. Auntie, I said I would resolve it. Mr. Jean, please. Mother Sure's face darkened. She looked at Jean Hauser impolitely and pointed in the direction of the door. Mr. Jean, our small family can't afford to be associated with Mr. Jean. Auntie, I promised Wan that I would definitely resolve this matter. Jean Hauser was rarely patient, but Mother Sure didn't want to listen. Then we'll talk about it after you resolve it. The atmosphere was a little awkward and stiff. Jean Hauser's expression was a little awkward. He had never been good at explaining, but because the other party was Shi Mengwan's mother and an elder, his attitude was quite polite. Auntie, I just need some time to resolve it. This isn't a big deal. Shi Mengwan looked at him and didn't speak. Not a big deal? Why would she want a man who couldn't be with her openly? Mother Sure looked at him impolitely and didn't accept this explanation. Not a big deal? I wonder what Mr. Jean's definition of a big deal is? You think having a fiancé isn't a big deal, but if our Wan has a fiancé at home, I wonder if Mr. Jean also thinks it's not a big deal? She countered Jean Hauser, and Jean Hauser's expression became more and more uncomfortable. Auntie, please. Mother Sure's expression was already very ugly. It was true that she liked Jean Hauser before, but that was based on the fact that Jean Hauser had a clean background and no messy relationships around him. Jean Hauser had a fiancé. In Mother Sure's eyes, no matter how good he wasn't a good man. He couldn't be entrusted with her life. The atmosphere in the dining room was very awkward. Mother Sure and Shi Mengwan didn't look too good. Shi Mengwan sat there, and the corners of her lips curled into a mocking smile. She didn't go to see Jean Hauser. With Mother Sure's help, she had nothing to do. She even leisurely picked up the soup in front of her and took a sip. Freshly made Sansien soup, light and delicious, tastes really good. Mom, this soup is really delicious. She looked at Mother Sure with a faint smile on her face. That silent intimacy caused Jean Hauser's eyes to darken. If you like it, drink more. Mother Sure glanced at Jean Hauser as she spoke. Mr. Jean, if there's nothing else, you can leave first. Wan and I still want to eat. It's inconvenient for you to be here. Jean Hauser took a deep look at Shi Mengwan and finally stood up. He stood in front of the dining table. His tall figure made him look imposing as soon as he stood up. Mother Sure didn't give in, and Shi Mengwan still drank the soup leisurely. After drinking this soup, she felt much better. Her heartless appearance made Jean Hauser's expression turn a little ugly. He pulled out the chair and took a step back. Auntie, please give me some time. I will solve my problem. Mother Sure was unmoved. In her heart, nothing could compare to her son's happiness. Jean Hauser looked at Shi Mengwan again. She had already finished the soup in the bowl and handed the bowl to Mother Sure. The corners of her lips curled up into an extremely bright smile. Mom, get me another bowl of soup. Don't drink the soup. Drink it later. The first. As Mother Sure spoke, she scooped a bowl of rice for Shi Mengwan and placed it in her hand. Jean Hauser saw that she wasn't looking at him at all, and his expression was very ugly. Auntie, woman, I'll be leaving first. No one paid attention to him. Ever since Jean Hauser became famous as a young man, he had never encountered such a thing. However, Mother Sure and Shi Mengwan acted as if they didn't see him and continued to eat. Jean Hauser turned around and was about to leave. When Jean Hauser reached the door, Shi Mengwan suddenly called out to him. This time, both Mother Sure and Jean Hauser looked at her. They didn't understand what she was doing, especially Mother Sure. Her face was full of worry. Could this child be regretting it? Jean Hauser, leave the key to my house. After Shi Mengwan said this, she lowered her head and went to eat. Mother Sure seemed to have suddenly thought of this problem. She stared at Jean Hauser and waited for him to hand over the key. Jean Hauser stood at the door. This was the first time in his life that he had experienced such a predicament. He took a deep look at Shi Mengwan, then took out the key to Shi Mengwan's house and placed it at the entrance. He opened the door and walked straight out. The door opened and closed. Shi Mengwan's heart had been hanging in her throat, but now, she finally relaxed. Mother Shi sat down and looked at Shi Mengwan with a hint of heartache in her eyes. One. Mom, eat. Shi Mengwan knew what Mother Shi wanted to say without guessing, but she didn't want to hear it now. How could Mother Shi eat? She only felt that her daughter's life was bitter. Did you know that Zhang Haoze had a fiancé? Shi Mengwan lowered her head and didn't answer Mother Shi's question. However, this attitude was undoubtedly a tacit agreement. Daughter, why are you so stupid? Mom. Shi Mengwan's eyes were a little sore, and her heart was also uncomfortable. She forced herself to ignore it. It's all in the past. He's gone now, isn't he? This person had left, but the impact was still there. When Mother Shi thought of the impact Shi Mengwan had caused because of the other party, she felt even more uncomfortable. This Zhang Haoze looks like a decent person. Why would he do something like having an affair? Shi Mengwan didn't answer her, and Mother Shi didn't need her to answer either. She said to herself, that's true. You can know a person's face but not his heart. There are some people in this world who really can't see through it. She looked at Shi Mengwan worriedly and sighed in her heart. Why do you think your life is so bitter? Mom. Shi Mengwan stopped eating for a moment. She looked at Mother Shi. Can you stop talking? It's all in the past. Yes, it's all in the past. Mother Shi stopped talking. In the future, stay away from that Zhang guy. I know. It's not that I'm stopping you, but no matter how good this man is, he's still someone else's. Mom, I told you I know. In the future, I'll find a better one. We'll talk about it later. How could she be in the mood to look for another one now? That Xiaoqi, Mom, can you not mention him? If Shi Mengwan was interested in Xiaoqi, the two of them would have been together a long time ago. She just didn't mean that. Mother Shi let out a long sigh. Seeing her like this, Shi Mengwan put down the bowl in her hand, picked up the bowl, and placed a bowl of soup in front of her. All right, let's eat. Seeing that Mother Shi still didn't seem to be happy, she said nonchalantly, Mom, don't worry. Your daughter is loved by everyone. Flowers bloom when they see flowers. Someone will definitely want her. Seeing her like this, Mother Shi could only let it go no matter how worried she was. Shi Mengwan lowered her eyes and focused on eating. She didn't respond to Mother Shi's words. Tang Hua looked at Zhang Haoze. Even if he didn't say anything, he could tell that Zhang Haoze was in a very bad mood. Boss? How's the cooperation case with Tianji? It's almost done. We're just waiting to sign the contract. Confirm this matter again later. Sign the contract in these 2 days. In silence, Zhang Haoze looked out of the window. No one knew what he was thinking. Tang Hua felt a chill on the back of his neck. Boss's mood really wasn't right? It couldn't be because of that person, right? Is there any movement over there? The old man's health seems to be getting worse. I heard that he called a lawyer again 2 days ago. Call a lawyer? Zhang Haoze narrowed his eyes as if he had thought of something. He sneered. Make the arrangements. I'll make a trip to Qing City. Okay, I'll make the arrangements now. Tang Hua had just opened the office door when he saw Chen Feifei standing at the door. His expression was a little strange. Miss Chen. This shout was especially loud, causing Chen Feifei to glare at him. What are you shouting for? You're so surprised. I don't know why Brother Hao left someone like you by his side. Tang Hua rubbed his nose and turned to look at Zhang Haoze. Zhang Haoze gave him a look, and he quickly left. After he left, Zhang Haoze picked up the document beside him and started reading. Chen Feifei bit her lip and walked in quickly. Brother Hao, what have you been busy with these 2 days? You haven't been in the company for 3 days. I have something to do. What's more important than the company's matters? Chen Feifei was wearing a decent professional suit and holding a document in her hand. Zhang Haoze looked up at her. What's the matter? Of course there's something. Chen Feifei's attention was successfully diverted by Zhan Haoze. She waved the folder in her hand. Brother Hao, I also want to contribute to the company. This is a proposal that I spent a few days making. Take a look. Zhan Haoze wasn't in a hurry to take the document. He looked at Chen Feifei with a solemn and somewhat gloomy expression. Yes. You don't have to work so hard. Zhan Haoze was serious. You can stay at home and enjoy your days as the eldest daughter of the Chen family. Chen Feifei looked at Zhan Haoze blankly, as if she didn't quite understand what he meant. But I want to enter the company. I want to help you. There's no need. Zhan Haoze said directly, Feifei, don't waste all your time on me. You should go live your own life. Chapter 689. It means that you should live your own life. Your own life. Zhan Haoze explained again in a rare good temper. Chen Feifei understood, but she would rather not understand. Brother Hao, what do you mean? What do you mean by my own life? This is the kind of life I want. Zhan Haoze looked at her calmly. I mean, you can contact more members of the opposite sex, fall in love, and enjoy the process of falling in love. Chen Feifei looked at him in a daze. It took her some time to understand what Zhan Haoze meant. Her eyes were filled with shock. After she reacted, her emotions began to lose control. Brother Hao, what do you mean? I'm your fiancé. You want me to find another man? Feifei, you know that I only have sibling feelings for you. Brother Hao. Chen Feifei interrupted him. Don't say any more. I don't want to hear it. Feifei, Brother Hao, I don't want to fall in love with another man. I like you, I love you. I don't want anyone else. I just want you. But I don't love you. In the past, Zhan Haoze was worried about Chen Feifei's body, so he had never said it to her so straightforwardly. He was only hinting. Now, he didn't want to continue. Chen Feifei's face turned pale. She looked at Zhan Haoze and didn't accept what he said at all. Brother Hao, I know you don't love me, but now you don't even give me a chance to love you? Is that so? Zhan Haoze's cold face softened because of Chen Feifei's expression. Feifei, you're still young. You don't quite understand what love is. Why don't I understand? Chen Feifei shook her head and refused to accept what Zhan Haoze said. I only know that I like you. I've always liked you. I didn't know anything in the past. I stayed at home every day waiting for you to come back and accompany me. But now I've changed. Look, I like you. I go to work every day. I work very hard. My dad praised me last time. Brother Hao, I can do anything, but I can't live without you. Don't do this to me. But her heart palpitations were acting up again. She covered her heart with one hand and looked at Zhan Haoze with a pained expression. Brother Hao, I really can do anything, as long as you don't abandon me. Feifei. After all, she was the girl he had watched grow up. Zhan Haoze's expression was cold, but not as cold as before. You don't have to be like this. I really don't love you. Because you don't love me, you've deprived me of my right to love you, right? There were tears in Chen Feifei's eyes. Because of her illness, her face was very pale, and she looked quite weak and uncomfortable. However, Zhan Haoze was not moved at all. Feifei, you need to live your own life. She would not have him in her life. These days, Chen Feifei had been thinking about doing her job well and making Zhan Haoze look at her in a new light. But she didn't expect Zhan Haoze to be so heartless. Brother Hao. Chen Feifei stepped forward, wanting to grab Zhan Haoze's hand. Zhan Haoze avoided it, and her face became paler. Brother Hao, do you hate me so much now? What did I do wrong? Zhan Haoze didn't answer her question. Feifei, I probably have to go out tomorrow. You can also take this opportunity to think about what I said. He had said everything he could. As for how to get over it, it was her own business. Just as he was about to call Tang Hualai to send her back, Chen Feifei's body went limp and she actually fainted in his arms. Feifei. When she fell to the ground, Zhan Haoze had no choice but to reach out to support her. He carried her in his arms and hurried out of the room. An hour later, Qin Yongchang, who had rushed over after hearing the news, looked at his unconscious daughter on the hospital bed. His gaze at Jean Hauser was unusually gloomy. "Hauser, is this how you treat Fei-Fei?" Jean Hauser was silent. His appearance made Qin Yongchang even angrier. "Tell me, how have I treated you all these years? Not to mention that I've been wholeheartedly nurturing you all these years. Just take it as me saving you back then and preventing you from dying on the streets. You should think about thanking me, right? I don't want you to keep talking about our family's kindness to you every day. But no matter what, you know how good Fei-Fei has been to you all these years. If you treat her like this now, will you be able to face Fei-Fei?" Jean Hauser pursed his lips into a straight line. No matter what Qin Yongchang said, he just didn't say anything. Qin Yongchang was furious. He pointed at him and said, "So I've raised an ingrate all these years? Jean Hauser, you're not being kind like this." Jean Hauser stood there and let Qin Yongchang's hand almost poke the tip of his nose. From time to time, doctors and nurses passed by in the corridor. Qin Yongchang retracted his hand hatefully. "Hauser, you can't be heartless." "Uncle." Jean Hauser finally spoke. "You should have seen everything I've done for the Qin family over the years. The Qin family has done me a favor. I know that I've been repaying the favor all these years. But there are some things that you know that you can't force. I only have sibling love for Fei-Fei, not love between a man and a woman. If Fei-Fei really is with me, she won't be happy. You're saying this now? Then why did you agree to be engaged to Fei-Fei back then?" Jean Hauser's expression didn't change, but there was a flash of mockery in his eyes. "Do you still need me to tell you what happened during that engagement?" Qin Yongchang couldn't keep his face straight, so he could only bring up the favor again. "Anyway, the Qin family has done you a favor, and Fei-Fei has also done you a favor. You can't do something like burning the bridge after crossing the river." As he spoke, he grabbed Jean Hauser's arm. "Don't forget. If Fei-Fei hadn't insisted on saving you back then, you would have been buried on some mountain by now. I won't ask for anything else from you. Anyway, you have to be responsible for Fei-Fei." Jean Hauser looked at Qin Yongchang's hand, and his eyes were slightly cold. Under that gaze, even Qin Yongchang, who had lived more than 20 years longer than him, had no choice but to retract his hand. The doctor happened to come out at this moment to tell them that Chen Fei-Fei had woken up. The two of them entered the ward together. Chen Fei-Fei's face was pale, and her entire body was like a destroyed little white flower. When she saw Jean Hauser, her eyes turned red again, and she looked like she wanted to say something, but she hesitated. Qin Yongchang's heart ached for his daughter. He glared at Jean Hauser hatefully and took a few steps forward. "Fei-Fei, how are you?" "Dad, I'm fine." Chen Fei-Fei's voice was weak, which made Qin Yongchang's heart ache. She just stared at Jean Hauser. "Brother Hao, can we say a few words?" Jean Hauser didn't say anything, but his expression became more serious than before. Chen Fei-Fei bit her lip and pleaded, "Brother Hao, you don't even want to say a few words to me now?" Qin Yongchang glared at Jean Hauser again. "Fei-Fei, Dad will wait for you for a while. I still have something to talk to you about." He went out, and only Chen Fei-Fei and Jean Hauser were left in the ward. "Brother Hao, Fei-Fei." Jean Hauser looked at her. "I'm going to Qing City tomorrow. I won't be back for a while." "Brother Hao." Chen Fei-Fei was anxious. She wanted to get out of bed, but Jean Hauser stopped her. "During this period of time, you can think about what you want. What I want is you. You've always been the only one. You're still too young." Jean Hauser shook his head. "Your dad is very worried about you. Take good care of yourself and don't do anything that will make him more worried." After saying this, Jean Hauser didn't look at Chen Fei-Fei anymore. He turned around and left the ward. Chen Fei-Fei wanted to get out of bed and chase after him, but Qin Yongchang had already come in and stopped her. Jean Hauser didn't see any of this, but at this time, even if he saw it, he wouldn't care. When he left the hospital, Tang Hua had been guarding him. When he saw him come out, he immediately went forward to open the car door for him. After he got into the car, Tang Hua signaled the driver to drive. He looked at him worriedly. "Boss, how's Chen Fei-Fei?" Jean Hauser didn't say anything. Tang Hua raised his eyebrows, and there was a hint of gossip on his face. "Chen Yongcheng, that old fox won't use kindness to ask you to repay it again, right? Seeing that Jean Hauser didn't say anything, Tang Hua snorted. That old fox. Does he really think that you don't know what he did later? Jean Hauser didn't respond. Seeing that he wasn't angry, Tang Hua couldn't help but say a few more words. Speaking of which, the economic crisis of the Qin family almost caused the entire Qin family to go bankrupt. If it weren't for your help, how could the Qin family still have any glory now? Not to mention their current status in Lin City, if it weren't for you supporting the entire Qin family that year, I'm afraid that the father and daughter would have lived a hard life long ago. How could they still have the face to talk to you about kindness? This old fox is really thick-skinned. Feeling Jean Hauser's gaze on him, Tang Hua didn't back down. That's true. That little kindness has long been repaid. That is, Jean Hauser's gaze became sharper and sharper, and Tang Hua didn't say anything else. Boss, don't glare at me. I'm just feeling wronged for you. Jean Hauser continued to be silent. It didn't matter if he felt wronged or not. It was a fact that Chen Feifei and Qin Yongchang had saved him. This was undeniable. It was understandable that Qin Yongchang wanted to repay them. However, it was up to him whether he agreed to repay them in his own way. Because of Mother Shi's arrival, Shi Mengwan felt much better. Other than the mention of Jean Hauser during breakfast, the two of them didn't talk about him anymore. Shi Mengwan recovered very quickly. She felt almost better the next day. As soon as she recovered, she wanted to go to work, but Mother Shi wouldn't let her. The studio is your own anyway. Your body is also your own. You can work at any time, but if your body collapses, you won't be able to. Because Mother Shi was around, Shi Mengwan couldn't go to work, so she could only agree to rest at home for another day. Mother Shi was very happy to receive her daughter's affirmation. She picked up her bag and went out to buy groceries. Just as Mother Shi left, the doorbell rang. Shi Mengwan happened to see Mother Shi's phone on the coffee table. She thought it was Mother Shi who had returned to take her phone, so she went to open the door without thinking too much. When the door opened and she saw Jean Hauser standing outside, Shi Mengwan closed the door without thinking. Jean Hauser stretched out his long legs and directly blocked her from closing the door. The door couldn't be closed, so he took this opportunity to flash in. Jean Hauser? In the next second, she hugged Jean Hauser. Shi Mengwan instinctively wanted to struggle. Don't move. Jean Hauser pressed his chin against her neck. Let me hug you. Shi Mengwan's body was very stiff. She was hugged tightly by Jean Hauser. She couldn't even move. However, she had never seen Jean Hauser like this before. She was a little dazed. She subconsciously moved her body. Jean Hauser let go of her at this moment. He took a few steps back and his gaze fell on Shi Mengwan's face. He looked at her greedily. Have you recovered from your illness? Yes. Shi Mengwan's expression didn't change. Jean Hauser nodded. I need to go out. This time, it might take a long time. It has nothing to do with me, Shi Mengwan answered without thinking. After saying that, she saw Jean Hauser's gloomy face. It was too late to change her mind. Moreover, she didn't think she was wrong. Jean Hauser, you're not anyone to me. You really don't need to report your whereabouts to me. She said that, but Jean Hauser looked at her deeply. I've already made it clear to Qin Feifei. Really? Did it have anything to do with her? He had made it clear to Qin Feifei, but what was the result? Did they break off the engagement? If not, what was the use of him saying all this today? Jean Hauser's brows twitched slightly. He looked at Shi Mengwan with a rare gentleness. Wan, are you willing to give me some time? He couldn't tell her how much time he needed. After all, there was still a lot of trouble in Qing City. It wasn't something that could be resolved in a day or two. He should have endured it and waited for the trouble to be resolved before looking for her, but he couldn't bear to. I'm not willing. Shi Mengwan's words were even more heartless than before. Jean Hauser's eyes darkened. Wan, you should go. Otherwise, my mother will be back later. Jean Hauser stood still, but Shi Mengwan went forward and opened the door. He looked like he couldn't wait for her to leave. Jean Hauser's expression was very ugly. He looked at Shi Mengwan with a very complicated gaze. Shi Mengwan acted as if she didn't see it. Instead, she opened the door a little more. Wanwan. Shi Mengwan turned her face away. She didn't look at him at all, nor did she listen to his explanation. Zhang Haoze was helpless. He looked at the time and was about to board the plane. He couldn't help but look at Shi Mengwan again, but she still didn't look at him. He could only turn around and leave. When he left, his shoulders drooped, and his entire body revealed a great sense of powerlessness. Shi Mengwan's action of closing the door stiffened for a moment. After Zhang Haoze walked out, he stopped again. Shi Mengwan didn't want to continue watching, so she closed the door with a bang. After the door closed, she leaned against the door. She told herself that all of this was Zhang Haoze acting. It was all fake. She couldn't be soft-hearted, and she couldn't be soft-hearted. That was it. However, she couldn't forget Zhang Haoze's disappointed back view before he left, and the words he kept telling her to give him time. The plane slowly landed at Qing City Airport. Zhang Haoze came out of the airport and got into the car waiting outside. His expression wasn't good. In fact, he had been gloomy ever since he came out of Shi Mengwan's house. Tang Hua didn't even dare to speak. Now that he had arrived at Qing City, he had no choice but to speak. "Boss, there's news from my hometown." "What news?" "The old man has brought Zhang Yi into the ancestral house these few days." "Johnny?" He hadn't heard of this person before. As Tang Hua spoke, he took out a document and placed it in Zhang Haoze's hand. "This has all of Zhang Yi's information. Take a look first." Zhang Haoze took the document and flipped through it. At this moment, the car drove towards Zhang Haoze's residence in Qing City, Cherry Blossom Manor. The Zhang family was the #1 family in Qing City. The head of the Zhang family, Zhang Kun, had always been the pillar of the entire Zhang family. In the past few years, Zhang Kun's health had been getting worse and worse. He, who was gradually getting old, began to delegate some of the power in his hands to his son, Zhang Lai. Zhang Lai wasn't Zhang Kun's only son. The Zhang family had power and influence. When Zhang Kun was young, he was quite unrestrained when it came to women. Other than Zhang Lai, he also had several illegitimate daughters and illegitimate children. But those children weren't Zhang Lai. Some of them didn't even have the right to enter the Zhang family. This wasn't because Zhang Lai was outstanding, but because Zhang Lai was born from Zhang Kun's only wife. He was the legitimate son, and also the eldest son. He was also the product of the combination of power. Zhang Kun made his fortune by taking the side path. After his business grew bigger and bigger, he knew that a tall tree would attract the wind. In order to protect the Zhang family's secret business, he married the daughter of a high-ranking official in the province where Qing City was located at that time. In the first few years of the strong marriage, he treated his wife with some respect. Although he played outside, he didn't have any illegitimate children. But later, Zhang Lai's biological mother gave birth to Zhang Lai and had a son, so he didn't care anymore. He could play however he wanted outside. More importantly, Zhang Lai's mother died when she gave birth to him. Zhang Lai was born without a mother. Zhang Kun was young at that time, and Zhang Lai's grandfather knew that such a daughter couldn't keep her virginity for her daughter. Therefore, after communicating with each other, they made 2 rules. First, Zhang Lai couldn't call another woman mother, which meant that Zhang Kun could forget about marrying again in this lifetime. Secondly, everything in the Zhang family in the future must belong to Zhang Lai. There were only these 2, and the rest was up to Zhang Kun to do. Zhang Kun had nothing to disagree with. Even if he didn't want to agree, in that kind of situation at that time, the Zhang family's business really needed to be taken care of by the external family. Therefore, Zhang Kun was quite concerned about his son, Zhang Lai. On one hand, he took good care of him. Second, he was also groomed as a successor. However, as Zhang Lai grew up, he began to have his own ideas. Zhang Kun realized that this son of his was different from him. Zhang Kun liked women and power. He seemed affectionate, but he was actually heartless. What about Zhang Lai? He had never liked women since he was young. Until he reached puberty, he would avoid women as much as possible. For a long time, Zhang Kun thought that his son was sick. When Zhang Lai was 18 years old, he even specially prepared 2 women and sent them to Zhang Lai's bed. Unfortunately, Jean Lai didn't touch those two women at all. Instead, he seemed to be frightened and didn't go home for a few days. Jean Kuan was angry. Later, he asked a psychiatrist and repeatedly confirmed that Jean Lai only didn't like the woman he chose, and not because Jean Lai didn't like women. That was why he stopped all actions of sending women to Jean Lai. However, it was precisely this Jean Lai who didn't like women. However, not long after he graduated from university, he took a fancy to a woman from a commoner background. It didn't matter if he took a fancy to her. He just wanted to play with her. Jean Kuan would never control his son in these matters. But look at his son. Not only did he insist on being with this commoner woman, he also decided to marry her. This was something that Jean Kuan absolutely couldn't tolerate. He chose Jean Lai as his successor and groomed Jean Lai according to the method of a successor. He had to let him follow the path that he had arranged for him. He tried his best to stop Jean Lai from being with that commoner woman, and then gave that commoner woman a sum of money. He wanted that woman to leave his son. However, he didn't expect that commoner woman to be so scheming. After taking his money, she showed the check to Jean Lai. When Jean Lai saw the check, he had a big fight with him. Once again, he showed his determination to be with that woman. Of course, this wasn't something that Jean Kuan could tolerate. He didn't raise Jean Lai to let him disobey him. He asked people to keep an eye on Jean Lai and not let him see that woman. He asked people to send that woman away far away. But he didn't expect that his good son. In order to be with that woman, he took advantage of the fact that he was busy with his family's business to look for that woman. When he was young, Jean Lai wasn't fully fledged, so of course he didn't have that much ability. But even if he couldn't get married, he still had an external family. Jean Lai's grandfather came out to help Jean Lai at this moment. Not only did he successfully find that woman, but the two of them even eloped. This was simply a provocation to Jean Kuan's authority. How could he tolerate such a thing happening? He used the name of the Jean family to set up a bounty. Both the black and white forces received the bounty. However, with Jean Lai's external family opposing him, he couldn't find Jean Lai and that woman for a long time. It wasn't until later that someone finally told him the news of Jean Lai and that woman. Jean Kuan hid from the world. The spies of the external family brought people and personally went to look for them. However, he found out that not only did Jean Lai and that woman not break up, they even had a child. Seeing that Jean Lai even had a child, this didn't make Jean Kuan calm down. It only made him even angrier. Especially when Jean Kuan saw his son, the outstanding son that he had single-handedly raised. The son who wanted to let the other party inherit the entire Jean family business. Just like an ordinary man, he accompanied a woman to go shopping and buy groceries. He looked at his son and actually smiled like an idiot. Holding a child in his arms, he smiled like a fool. He even saw his son changing the diapers of a child. When his son had already become a mediocre, tacky man. Jean Kuan couldn't control his emotions at all. To hell with any agreement. Such a son. He didn't want it. But after calming down, he began to vent his anger. The person who made his son become like this was that woman. If it weren't for that woman, his son wouldn't have become such a mediocre man. Chapter 690. The atmosphere in the carriage was very quiet. It had been a long time since Jean Hauser finished reading the information. There was no reaction. Tang Hua couldn't help but be a little worried. Boss. Jean Hauser withdrew his thoughts from the past. Looking at the information in his hand, his face was a little gloomy. His gaze fell on Zhang Yi's photo, and he sneered. If Zhang Yi comes back, won't Zhang Li and Zhang Yang be unable to sit still? His lips curled into a mocking smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tang Hua nodded. Zhang Li and Zhang Yang were transferred abroad by the old master. They won't be able to come back for the time being. At this point, Tang Hua's expression suddenly changed. I received news that Zhang Yi seems to have contacted the people in the sky. I think he's just trying to get Tianji's order and use it as a stepping stone to his family. Jean Hauser's gaze became more and more sinister. His gaze was gloomy, as if he had thought of something. Zhang Yi, don't think about the list in the sky. However, I can give him another big gift. Tang Hua looked at Zhan Haoze. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the street view of Qing City outside the window. No matter what, Zhan Li and Zhan Yang are part of the Zhan family. Since the old man wants Zhan Yi to go home, then they have to come back and send a congratulatory gift, right? Tang Hua understood and nodded. That's right. This gift can't be light. That's right. Since Zhan Li and Zhan Yang have sent a great gift, I, as their elder brother, naturally have to send a great gift as well. Boss. Tang Hua immediately reacted. Sixth brother is waiting. It's fine. Tell old 6 and old 7 to prepare. When does Zhan Yi come home? That's when we make our move. Don't worry. Zhan Kun lay on the hospital bed and listened to Uncle Chi's reply. He didn't look too well. Ever since he was struck by the wind, his body had not been in good shape. Even if he went out, he had to use a wheelchair. He had to gasp for air just to say a single sentence. More importantly, he couldn't move half of his body. For Zhan Kun, who had once been all-powerful, this was truly more uncomfortable than death. Zhan is back? He's here. Uncle Chi was the butler of the Zhan manor. He was also one of Zhan Kun's most trusted subordinates. He had followed Zhan Kun for many years. Let him come up. Zhan Yi came up. He looked somewhat similar to Zhan Kun. It could even be said that he was the most similar to Zhan Kun in the third generation. However, this resemblance was only in appearance. The thing you said last time, how is it? Because of the wind, Zhan Kun's voice was very slow. His voice was hoarse, and it sounded unpleasant no matter how one listened to it. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I didn't manage to get Skyline's deal. At this point, Zhan Yi was still a little unwilling. He knew that this was an opportunity for him. However, the current situation had exceeded his expectations. Zhan Kun narrowed his eyes with some dissatisfaction. The Zhan family was a big business, so he didn't put it in his eyes. But he was the one who called Zhan Yi back. If Zhan Yi couldn't come up with some good results, how could he convince the public? Not to mention that he was powerless now. He was old and could no longer support the Zhan family. Originally, Zhan Lai was the heir of the Zhan family, and Zhan Kun had high hopes for him. However, Zhan Lai's two sons, Zhan Yang and Zhan Li, weren't very successful. One had mediocre aptitude, so it was difficult for him to take on such a big responsibility. The other had some ability, but he was arrogant, complacent, and self-righteous. In Zhan Kun's eyes, neither of these two grandsons were qualified successors. Other than Zhan Lai, he didn't know how many illegitimate children he had outside. But at present, there were only a few who could be registered in Qing City. One was Zhan Ji, Zhan Yi's father. The other was Zhan Quan. He gave birth to Zhan Cheng and Zhan Shi. Compared to Zhan Yang and Zhan Li, Zhan Cheng and Zhan Shi were even more mediocre. Zhan Kun didn't like these grandsons. However, there was no one he could use at this time. Not to mention that none of the grandsons in the third generation could catch his eye. Even Zhan Lai and Zhan Kun were very dissatisfied. And he couldn't even say these dissatisfactions. Those secrets of the Zhan family made him unable to give up on Zhan Lai, his son. Even if he was just putting on a show, he had no choice but to hand over some power to Zhan Lai. Not to mention that he was unwilling to hand over these power to Zhan Lai. Zhan Lai wasn't young anymore. He was already in his 50s. No matter how capable he was, his energy couldn't be compared to that of a young person. The Zhan family needed new blood. But among the 5 grandsons, none of them were to his liking. Previously, he had revealed some intentions to let Zhan Yi think that he could enter the Zhan family and obtain the Zhan family's power. But he didn't expect that this Zhan Yi was also a useless person. Stupid? He wanted to scold him for being an idiot, but now was the time to use Zhan Yi. Zhan Kun thought of this and became more and more angry. Zhan Yi was a rare smart person in the third generation of the Zhan family. How could he not know what Zhan Kun wanted to scold? Perhaps he had thought of something. Zhan Yi suddenly raised his head. Grandfather, don't you want to know who the person who intercepted the order from Tianji and made me return empty-handed was and waste these few months? Zhan Kun looked at him, and a bad premonition flashed in his old and turbid eyes. What do you want to say? The person who obtained the order from Tianji is Zhang Haoze. Zhang Yi said word by word, even if he couldn't get anything good. He had to drag someone down with him. Zhang Kuen's face suddenly turned red, and he started coughing violently. Uncle Qi was behind him, quickly supporting his body and patting him on the back. However, it was useless. Zhang Kuen was still coughing violently. He glared at Zhang Yi, almost wanting to stare a hole in his body. What did you say? His voice was hoarse and his eyes were bloodshot. Zhang Yi had never been close to this grandfather. Seeing Zhang Kuen like this, he was a little scared. I said, the person who obtained the order from Tianji is Zhang Haoze. Zhang Kuen coughed again. This time, he coughed even more violently than before. The order from Tianji wasn't much. Although the profits it brought were considerable, it wasn't necessary for the Zhang family. However, the person who obtained the order from Tianji shouldn't be Zhang Haoze. Anyone could do it, but it couldn't be Zhang Haoze. That be ****. Grandfather, Zhang Yi still wanted to say something more. Zhang Kuen grabbed the water cup by the bedside and threw it at Zhang. Although he was old, the temper of his youth was still there. This throw almost hit Zhang Yi's head. If he hadn't dodged quickly, his face would have been disfigured. Grandfather, since you're fine, I'll go out first. After saying that, Zhang Yi turned around and left. His footsteps seemed to be chased by a ghost. When Zhang Kuen saw this, he coughed violently again. No matter how Uncle Qi comforted him, it was useless. It wasn't easy for him to calm down, but Zhang Kuen's expression was still terrifyingly gloomy. ****, he's indeed a ****. I should have killed him back then. I should have killed him. It was obvious that it took a lot of effort to speak, but he still said 2 sentences in a row. It could be seen how angry Zhang Kuen was. After scolding, he looked at Uncle Qi. Give the order. I don't want to see that **** live in this world. No matter who you find, no matter what method you use, I don't want to see him again. Uncle Qi had followed Zhang Kuen for the longest time. When he heard his decision, he couldn't help but frown. Master Kuen, Zhang Haoze's ability is not bad. Wouldn't it be a pity to get rid of him just like that? Others didn't know what Zhang Haoze had done all these years, but Uncle Qi knew it very well. If such a capable person could really take over the Zhang family, the Zhang family would definitely be able to continue their glory. Don't even think about it. Zhang Kuen didn't consider this suggestion at all. Even if my Zhang family's things are thrown away, donated, and squandered, I definitely won't give them to that ****. Uncle Qi was speechless, but he could understand Zhang Kuen's concerns. Zhang Kuen didn't care if he understood or not. What he needed to do now was to get rid of Zhang Haoze, who was an eyesore. Do as I say. Zhang Haoze didn't know that someone wanted his life. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He had been very busy in Qing City for the past 2 days, very busy. On one hand, he had personally negotiated the cooperation with Tianji. With this business, the company would definitely rise to a higher level. On the other hand, he was also preparing a congratulatory gift. In order to build momentum for Zhang Yi, Zhang Kuen actually held a banquet for Zhang Yi. Before the banquet began, Zhang Kuen specially asked the doctor to come over and examine him. He was also in good spirits. Tonight was a big day, so no matter how angry he was, he wouldn't show it. The Zhang family had been operating in Qing City for decades, and their relationships were very complicated. There were also many people. Since Zhang Kuen wanted to support Zhang Yi, the scene naturally wouldn't be small. It could even be said to be quite a big scene. He first appeared with Zhang Yi and introduced him in front of everyone. This was his grandson. In the future, he would be in charge of some of the Zhang family's business. When he said this, he didn't have to care about other people's feelings at all. Naturally, he didn't know that other than Zhang Yi's father, Zhang Ji, the rest of the people present didn't look too good. Especially Zhang Lai. His face was so gloomy that it could almost drip blood. Zhang Kuen had always been used to being self-centered, not to mention the thoughts of his son and grandson. He had never cared about anyone's thoughts for so many years. However, just when he was having a good time, 2 uninvited guests came to the venue. Jean Cohen, who was originally bringing Jean-E around the venue to identify people, suddenly had a bad premonition when he saw the people. He instinctively looked at Uncle Chi, but Uncle Chi didn't expect such people to come on such a day. He was stunned for a moment. Soon, the two of them walked to Jean Cohen's wheelchair. Jean Hauser got on the plane. The private plane was already ready and could take off at any time. He was still waiting for the final news. 5 minutes later, it was time to take off, and the news he was waiting for had also come back. Tang Hua hung up the phone and walked towards Jean Hauser with a smile on his face. "Boss, the old man is in the hospital again." Jean Hauser wasn't surprised at all. Ever since Jean Cohen had a stroke last time, his health hadn't been as good as before. If he was provoked again tonight, it would be strange if he didn't go to the hospital. "Boss, do you think the old man will die just like that?" If that was really the case, it would be too easy for Jean Cohen. After so many years, who knew how many bad things he had done? Yet there was no retribution at all. No. Jean Hauser was extremely calm. After a short period of happiness, he was thinking about what they were going to do next. The old man won't die so easily. Even if he was struck by the wind again, or if he fell ill again and couldn't move his entire body, he wouldn't die so easily. After all, the Jean family was relying on him to support it. Jean Cohen knew very well that if he fell, the Jean family would have no leader. When the time came, the people outside would attack them together. Even if the Jean family was big, they wouldn't be able to withstand it easily. What a pity! Tang Hua punched the seat under him. "Boss, you should have killed him directly." Jean Hauser shook his head. Kill Jean Cohen? He didn't have that thought yet. His only thought right now was that Jean Cohen couldn't die so easily. Because that would be too easy on him. He didn't know how much he hated Jean Cohen. He hated him so much that he wanted to cut him into pieces. Wah! Keep an eye on him during this period of time. With such a thing happening to Jean Cohen, I'm afraid the Jean family won't be peaceful either. You have to pay more attention. Don't worry, I know. Tang Hua looked at Jean Hauser. But you, boss, you have to pay more attention. We've been doing so much recently. I'm afraid that the old man will attack you. No. He probably won't have time to deal with me for the time being. Jean Hauser thought of something, and the corners of his lips curled up again. He should be having a headache about the big gift I gave him now. Tang Hua smiled and was relieved. Jean Hauser didn't stay idle even when he was on the plane. He almost didn't rest on the plane. He had been dealing with business. When the plane landed, it was already night time in Lin City. Jean Hauser looked at the time. It was almost 10 o'clock. Tang Hua asked him where he was going. He seemed to have thought of something and answered with 4 words. After he finished speaking, he realized that he was talking about Shi Mingwan's home address. Without taking back his words, the driver drove the car to Yeyuan apartment. By the time they arrived at Shi Mingwan's home, it was already past 11 o'clock. "Boss?" Tang Hua looked upstairs and then at Jean Hauser. "You?" Jean Hauser got out of the car and turned to look at Tang Hua. "Help me send my luggage back to the apartment and pick me up tomorrow morning." "Boss." Tang Hua had concerns, but Jean Hauser didn't. He turned around and went upstairs. Standing at Shi Mingwan's door, Jean Hauser closed his eyes. He thought for a moment and took out a bunch of keys from his pocket. If Shi Mingwan saw this, she would definitely scream and scold Jean Hauser for not keeping his word. Jean Hauser didn't have that many concerns. He opened the door with the key and found the direction of the room with familiarity. He had asked before he came. The person he had arranged here told him that Shi Mingwan had already returned to her hometown, so Shi Mingwan was the only one in the apartment now. The living room was very quiet and there was no light at all. The darkness didn't affect Jean Hauser's performance. He just took advantage of the night. He entered Shi Mingwan's room with familiarity. Chapter 691. The room was very quiet, so quiet that he could hear Shi Mingwan's steady breathing. Jean Hauser didn't move either. He just sat there and looked at Shi Mingwan's face. Time passed bit by bit. The east gradually turned white, and Shi Mingwan, who was on the bed, turned around. In this way, he was completely facing Jean Hauser. He lowered his head and planted a gentle kiss on her forehead. The kiss was very light, like a feather brushing across Shi Mengwan's forehead. She furrowed her brows in her sleep. Zhang Haoze didn't smooth her eyebrows. He looked at her for a while, and after confirming that she didn't show any signs of waking up, he got up and left. When he went downstairs, Tang Hua was still waiting. Seeing Zhang Haoze's expression, he sighed. "Boss, let's go." Zhang Haoze got into the car and looked back at the apartment. "I'm afraid there's going to be a tough battle." He had made so many moves recently. The Zhang family probably wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see Shi Mengwan for a while. But Tang Hua looked at Zhang Haoze and sighed in his heart. "You're too tired." Zhang Haoze leaned back and closed his eyes to rest. Just when Tang Hua thought that he would not speak, he let out an extremely faint sigh. "It doesn't matter. I'm used to it anyway." For so many years, he had racked his brains, not daring to relax in the slightest. Whether it was at the Chen family or back to Qingqing. Tang Hua pursed his lips into a straight line and turned his face to signal the driver to drive. His eyes were a little red. After sorting out his emotions, Tang Hua looked at Zhang Haoze again. "Where are we going next?" "Let's go into the company and arrange everything. We'll return to Qing City tonight." Zhang Haoze had a lot of things to do in the company. In the past few years, he had put in a lot of effort to expand his business. He needed to have the strength to fight against the Zhang family in the shortest time possible. Although it was difficult, it was something he had no choice but to do. It took him a day to settle most of the company's affairs and arrange for the people to guard the company. He signed the 2 contracts that were originally scheduled to be signed. From now on, he would focus all his energy on Qingqing. That was his main battlefield. Before boarding the plane, he didn't forget to ask Tang Hua about Zhang Kuen's current situation. "After our people let Zhang Li and Zhang Yang cause such a ruckus yesterday, the old man was sent to the hospital. It is said that the rescue lasted until the second half of the night. He's still in the ICU." Tang Hua's words were full of schadenfreude, but there was also some worry on his face. "Boss, do you think the old man will die just like this?" "I won't." Zhang Haoze sneered. "I told you he still has things to worry about. He won't die just like that." "Then, should we postpone the plan for now?" "No need." Zhang Haoze was impatient and didn't want to slow down. "Let's see when the old man wakes up. I still have to give them my second big gift." Tang Hua smiled. "Big gift? Wasn't this a great gift?" The old man would probably faint if he accepted Zhang Haoze's gift. It wasn't that he fainted from happiness, but from anger. Zhang Kuen was in the ICU. The 2 brothers, Zhang Lai and Zhang Ji, stood guard outside. Zhang Lai sat on the bench and looked anxiously at the emergency room, which was lit up with lights. His wife, Bai Shuqiao, was sitting next to him. She also looked anxious. Compared to them, although the expression on Zhang Ji's face was also very solemn, he didn't look very anxious. He glanced at his son. Zhang Yi understood and turned to walk out. Zhang Li and Zhang Yang blocked in front of him. The 2 of them didn't look very good at this moment. Both of them had bruised noses and swollen faces. Zhang Li's arm was still bandaged. It was obvious that his hand had been broken by someone. Zhang Yang wasn't much better. His face was also covered in injuries. Although there were no obvious fractures and it wasn't as serious as Zhang Li's, the color of his face was really very good-looking. These 2 combinations made people feel strange and funny at first glance. However, no one at the scene could laugh. "Zhang Yi, where are you going? You're not trying to escape, are you?" Although Zhang Li and Zhang Yang weren't the most ideal heirs in Zhang Kuen's eyes. But no matter what, they had grown up with Zhang Lai in the old mansion. These 2 brothers couldn't be said to be close to Zhang Kuen since they were young, but at least they could show their faces in front of Zhang Kuen more than those who couldn't show their faces outside. However, the 2 of them didn't expect Zhang Yi to appear out of nowhere. It was fine if Zhang Yi appeared. The 2 of them had suffered such a big loss at Zhang Yi's hands. Therefore, the 2 of them looked at Zhang Yi with resentment. Zhang Yi wasn't afraid of their provocation at all. He was quite calm. "Escape? Do I need to escape? Where do I escape to?" It's just that Grandpa told me to do something, although Grandpa is unconscious now. But I still have to finish what Grandpa told me to do. Otherwise, when Grandpa wakes up, he won't be happy. He was still young after all. He was suddenly brought back from the outside. Jean-Yi couldn't control the smugness on his face. Jean-Li and Jean-Yang were furious. Especially Jean-Yang. Jean-Yi, you want to leave just like that? No way. If you don't make things clear today, don't even think about leaving. That's right. If you don't make things clear, don't even think about leaving. Jean-Li glared at Jean-Yi and raised his uninjured hand to point at him. You beat the two of us up like this, and you want to leave just like that? Yesterday, Jean-Li and Jean-Yang entered the venue with injuries all over their bodies. As soon as they entered the door, they rushed towards Jean. Although the two of them were injured, they won because there were two of them. One of them punched Jean-Yi, and the other kicked him. Jean-Yi was protected by Jean Kuan, so he wasn't injured. However, such a good day was ruined by Jean-Li and Jean-Yang. Jean Kuan couldn't stand such a stimulation, and he didn't expect that the banquet he had meticulously arranged would have such a big mistake. In his anger, he was directly sent to the emergency room. Idiots! Jean-Yi sneered as he looked at the two people in front of him. Don't you go out with your brains? Jean-Yi, what do you mean? Jean-Yi, you bastard! Jean-Yang reached out his hand and was about to swing it at Jean-Yi's face again. Jean-Yi barely avoided it. He shook his head and looked at the two idiot brothers in front of him with some mockery. You said I beat you up? Are you saying that I did this to you? Without waiting for the two brothers to speak, Jean-Yi took a step forward. Why don't you think about it? Would I do such a stupid thing? You're basically being used by others without knowing it. If he isn't an idiot, then what is he? Yesterday was the first time Jean-Yi showed his face in front of others. It was supposed to be a great thing. But Jean-Li and Jean-Yang, who were outside, suddenly returned. It was one thing for him to come back, but he was injured all over and even attacked him the moment he arrived. That action was a slap on Jean Kuan's face. This angered Jean Kuan. He was so angry that he had to be hospitalized. At that time, Jean-Yi was busy acting as a filial son and grandson in front of the old man. He naturally didn't have the time to bicker with Jean-Li and Jean-Yang. However, he could be considered to have calmed down now. There was someone who wasn't on good terms with him and was using the Jean-Yang brothers to take care of him. Now that he saw that the two of them still had the time to find trouble with him, Jean-Yi's tone was naturally not very good. If it weren't for your stupidity, Grandpa wouldn't have been sent to the hospital. With the intelligence of the two brothers, they really wouldn't have thought that they had been instigated and used as a tool. Now, they heard Jean-Yi blame the reason why Jean Kuan was unconscious on them. Jean-Li and Jean-Yang's expressions changed. Say that again? They were out on a business trip, and it could be considered that they were exhausted for the Jean family. But what news did they hear? Jean Kuan actually recognized the child of another illegitimate child. He even planned to publicly introduce it into the upper class of Qing City? How could they allow such a thing to happen? Therefore, the two brothers hurriedly finished their work and returned to Qing City as soon as possible. They wanted to ask where this Jean-Yi came from. One had to know that all the children of the Jean family, without Jean Kuan's acknowledgement, even if their surname was Jean, it was useless. But when the two of them returned to Qing City, they were beaten up as soon as they got off the plane. The person who beat them up made it very clear that today was Jean-Yi's good day. He told them to be a little more perceptive and not come to cause trouble. This was something that had never happened to Jean-Li and Jean-Yang. Not only was it a great humiliation to be beaten up, but it was also a clear announcement of their status in the Jean family in the future. How could Jean-Li and Jean-Yang tolerate it? That was why they hurriedly came to teach Jean-Yi a lesson. Yesterday they were still fighting with him. Now that they were provoked by Jean-Yi's words, the two of them stood forward together, intending to teach Jean-Yi a lesson. Jean-Yi wasn't afraid at all. You guys are really stupid. If you have the time to look for trouble with me here, you might as well think about how to find the culprit. Aren't you the culprit? Why are you pretending to be a good person here? Jean-Li and Jean-Yang were furious. The two of them took another step forward, and Jean Li's hand was almost about to poke Jean Yi's face. A stupid pig is a stupid pig. It's fine if you're impulsive, but you don't have a brain. Jean Yi's words angered the two of them. Before they could speak, Bai Shuqiao, who had been silent all this time, couldn't take it anymore and stood up. Enough. She walked in front of Jean Yi and glared at the person who had snatched her son's position. It's not your turn to make decisions in the Jean family yet. No matter how bad Jean Li and Jean Yang are, they were still raised by the old master. Who do you think you are? Jean Ji was indignant. The juniors were quarreling, so why did Bai Shuqiao jump out? I say, sister-in-law, although you're the sister-in-law, you have to be reasonable. But you have to be reasonable when you speak and do things. The old master was originally angry because of them. Our Jean Yi isn't wrong. As one of Jean Kuen's sons, Jean Ji was quite capable. Otherwise, how could the old man acknowledge his existence when he had so many illegitimate children outside? But no matter how capable he was, he couldn't withstand the old man wholeheartedly supporting Jean Lai. But he desperately suppressed his sons who were outside. Now, it wasn't easy for the old man to be willing to help the younger generation, especially since his son had actually caught the old man's eye. As a father, he naturally had to support his son at this time. They were arguing fiercely on this side, but Uncle Chi could only sigh in his heart when he saw it. How decisive and resourceful was Jean Kuen back then? But looking at the people of the Jean family now, other than Jean Lai, who could barely take on the role, none of the remaining third generation could take on a big responsibility. No, there was one. Uncle Chi thought of that person. Although Jean Kuen didn't like Jean Hausa, if Jean Hausa could be used by the Jean family could regain its glory in his hands. However, Jean Kuen's order was to take Jean Hausa's life. Uncle Chi hadn't had the time to order his subordinates to deal with Jean Hausa yesterday. He had already prepared the Jean family's kill order, but now he was a little hesitant. Perhaps there was no need to kill Jean Hausa. The old master didn't have many days left. It was better to think of a way to take Jean Hausa in for his own use. Of course, if he really wanted to achieve that goal, he would probably have to go through some trouble. Uncle Chi thought of this, looked at the people in front of him, and turned around to do what he wanted to do. He had been by Jean Kuen's side for more than 30 years. His words could represent Jean Kuen's intentions. This time, he would let him make his own decision. Jean Hausa didn't care about what the Jean family had done because of him. He was busy preparing the second gift. At night, the people of the Jean family were tired of arguing, so they couldn't be bothered to argue anymore. There weren't many who really cared about the old man. When it was time, everyone except Jean Lai went to rest. Jean Lai couldn't take it anymore and went to rest in the middle of the night. To be honest, there were doctors and nurses in the VIP ward. There was no need for them to guard here. But there was only one purpose for these people to guard here. They wanted Jean Kuen to see them first when he woke up. They wanted to get attention and perform well. Jean Lai had been acting as a filial son for a long time. He was sleepy now, so he naturally went to rest. Other than the bodyguards, there was no one else in the ward. Just like last time, Jean Hausa easily entered the ward. But this time, the old man didn't wake up. In fact, the stimulation Jean Kuen received this time wasn't as big as the last time, but it was even more serious than the last time. It really wasn't because he saw Jean Li and Jean Yang, the two idiots, attack Jean Yi that he flared up. It was because of this that he thought of the same problem as Uncle Chi, the problem that made him the most frustrated and conflicted. That was, the Jean family had developed for so many years. It had been a 100-year-old family since the late Qing dynasty, but when it came to him, it had actually fallen to the point where there was no successor. How could this not make Jean Kuen depressed? Jean Yi was helpless. He was forced to make this choice. But no matter what, he had taught Jean Li and Jean Yang for a period of time, but they were still so stupid and so disregarding the overall situation. As the head of the Jean family, he wasn't qualified. Even as a descendant of the Jean family, he wasn't qualified. After being provoked like this, Jean Kuen became serious again. He had woken up in the afternoon, but when he woke up, he heard Jean Li and Jean Yang arguing outside about teaching Johnny a lesson. As soon as he was provoked, he fainted again. Jean Hauser didn't have much time for Jean Kuan. It was his business if he liked to sleep. His time was very precious. He took a look, picked up a glass of water from the bedside, and slowly poured it on Jean Kuan's face. Jean Kuan was old, and he hadn't recovered yet. Being splashed with cold water on his face, even though it wasn't cold in this season, made him uncomfortable. He woke up at the first moment and immediately discovered Jean Hauser standing by his bed. Jean Kuan remembered, but his body had just suffered a stroke. How could he have the strength? Jean Hauser casually put the cup in his hand aside. He looked down at Jean Kuan coldly. You? Jean Kuan wiped the water off his face. When he saw Jean Hauser, he was shocked. Didn't he ask Uncle Chi to deal with this person? Why was he still here? What about me? Jean Hauser sneered. I'm here because I have a gift for you. Jean Kuan looked at him defensively. He didn't believe that Jean Hauser would be so kind. You get out. I don't want your gift. Don't you want to hear what I'm giving you? When Jean Hauser spoke, the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. His entire person looked cold and gloomy. Get out. I don't want to see you. There was killing intent in Jean Kuan's eyes. After today's matter, he would definitely ask Uncle Chi to kill Jean Hauser. I don't want to see you either. I've already said that I'm just here to give you a gift. Jean Hauser looked at his face and said two words very slowly. Jean Kuan's expression changed. He tried to get up. Jean Hauser reached out a hand and pressed it on his chest. Jean Kuan was old, so he couldn't break free at all. You be asterisk starred, let go of me. He cursed, and Jean Hauser's strength increased by 30%. Jean Kuan's face suddenly turned pale. He glared at Jean Hauser, almost glaring a hole in his eyes. Do you know why the celebrity house and the fragrance house were closed? Jean Hauser exerted force in his hand. Looking at Jean Kuan's angry and painful appearance, but he couldn't resist, he only felt happy. One was closed because it was involved in drugs. The other was closed because it was suspected of organizing to sell silver. At this point, Jean Hauser smiled. Next is the heavenly fragrance restaurant, Spring of the Four Seasons. In the future, these businesses will close down in your hands one by one. Are you happy? What Jean Hauser said was all about the Jean family's business that was making a lot of money every day. Every one of them had a chain. They operated different projects and different categories. The only thing they had in common was that these were all profitable businesses. You? Jean Kuan pointed at Jean Hauser. No one had told him about this matter yet. It must have just happened today. Oh, right. I'm afraid that you'll be too worried and won't be able to recuperate in the hospital. He purposely snored. Since it's a seizure, it'll naturally take a little longer. It's not long to seize it for a year or so, don't you think? Be asterisk starred, you be asterisk starred. Other than this sentence, Jean Kuan didn't have any other words to curse. Jean Hauser sneered and finally let go of his hand. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and slowly wiped his hand. In the end, he threw the handkerchief at Jean Kuan's face. Jean Kuan was so angry by his action that he coughed again. Jean Hauser moved his face closer. This is just the beginning. Don't worry. I will definitely destroy the Jean family in my hands. Jean Kuan couldn't even speak properly. He could only point at Jean Hauser and keep panting. Jean Hauser wasn't in the mood to admire his sorry state anymore. He turned around and left. He was about to go downstairs, but he accidentally saw Jean lie in the corridor outside. Seeing the person, Jean Hauser directly walked past him and was about to leave. However, Jean Lai blocked in front of him. Why are you here? As he spoke, he looked in the direction of the ward. He didn't know what Jean Hauser wanted to do. Jean Hauser ignored him and walked past him. Seeing him like this, Jean Lai couldn't help but say, Jean Hauser, no matter what, you're a descendant of the Jean family. You, Mr. Jean, be careful with your words. Jean Hauser stood still and said without turning his head, although my surname is Jean, I'm not a descendant of the Jean family. I'm you. Jean Lai didn't finish his sentence. Jean Hauser suddenly turned around. He reached out and grabbed the front of Jean Lai's shirt. Mr. Jean. He used all his strength. The sinister expression on his face made people think that he was Satan from hell. "What are you to me? Say it, why aren't you saying it?" Jean Lai shrunk his neck. Facing Jean House's expression, he didn't dare to answer him for a moment. If Mr. Jean wants to live longer, it's better to think clearly. Jean House stood up straight as he spoke. His cold eyes didn't have a trace of warmth. "After all, to me, my parents are already dead." Jean Lai's face was a little pale. Jean House let go of his hand and took a step back. He clapped his hands, his gaze cold. "If Mr. Jean doesn't know how to speak, I don't mind sending you to meet them in advance. What do you think?" Jean Lai's aura was instantly suppressed by Jean House, and he didn't dare to speak again. Jean House looked at him and felt bored. He turned around and left. For the next month, Jean House didn't go anywhere. He stayed in Qing City and focused on dealing with the Jean family's businesses. The Jean family had many businesses, including the entertainment industry, the real estate industry, and the electronics industry. They were all involved in traditional industries. A month wasn't a short time, but the Jean family had too many businesses. With his current ability, it was impossible to destroy the Jean family in a day. He could only destroy them one by one. Jean House had bought a business in Qing City a few years ago. He bought the best location in the Cherry Blossom Villa. During this period of time, he had been living in the Cherry Blossom Villa. On one hand, he had to deal with the Jean family, and on the other hand, he had to prepare to move some of the company's main businesses to Qing City. Jean House didn't expect that after more than a month of silence, someone from the Jean family would actually take the initiative to look for him. Looking at Uncle Chi in front of him, Jean House sat down on the sofa expressionlessly. The Cherry Blossom Villa was decorated according to his preferences. It was simple but grand. Uncle Chi came in and took a few glances. When he saw Jean House, he took 2 steps forward and stood opposite him. "House." Uncle Chi was older than Jean Lai. He called Jean House's name to show his friendliness. Unfortunately, the person he met was Jean House. "What's the matter?" Uncle Chi smiled bitterly in his heart. Jean House had suppressed some of the Jean family's businesses, but now he was asking him what was the matter? "House, the Jean family is your family no matter what. What you're doing now isn't appropriate, right?" "What did I do?" Jean House raised his eyebrows, as if he didn't quite understand what Uncle Chi meant. "I won't repeat what you did." From the celebrity hall until now, many of the Jean family's businesses had been involved. Although it wasn't enough to shake the foundation, as a result, the entire Jean family was indeed in a state of panic. Uncle Chi originally wanted to get someone to make a move on Jean House, but after these days, not only did he not make a move, but he also couldn't bear to. Chapter 692. Get the Jean family? Jean House felt that this person was ridiculous. When did he ever want to get the Jean family? Whether it was money or status, he preferred to earn it with his own hands. He didn't want anything from the Jean family. In his heart, there would only be one outcome for the Jean family in the future, and that was to be destroyed by him with his own hands. He was already doing so, and it was only a matter of time before he reached the final step. Even Jean House had to admit that it wasn't unreasonable for Jean Kuan to be ruthless and ruthless. Just look at the power and momentum that the Jean family had developed in his hands all these years. But so what? He was not afraid at all. "Did you come here just to talk nonsense?" Uncle Chi choked. When he thought of his purpose in coming here, he wanted to explode, but he had no choice but to calm himself down. The Jean family had a large business. I'm sure you've seen the abilities of the other descendants of the 3rd generation. Since that was the case, why not take a step back? Your goal is just to get the Jean family. Now, I'll go and convince the old man to give you the Jean family, and you'll stop your actions. How about that? Uncle Chi felt that this was very good. He had followed Jean Kuan for many years and knew Jean Kuan's temper and personality very well. Now, Jean Kuan was already so sick. In the past month, if it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't see the Jean family fall in his hands, Jean Kuan would have been completely unable to hold on. Uncle Chi had been holding on to the Jean family's kill order for nearly 2 months, but he hadn't sent it out. It wasn't because he was soft-hearted or because of other reasons. It was just that after weighing the pros and cons, he realized that letting Jean Hauser take over the Jean family was the best outcome. Although he knew that this was the best outcome, all these years, he had always been by the Jean family and Jean Kuen's side. His position was the same as Jean Kuen's in some respects. To Jean Hauser, such a big surprise was a great gift. Unfortunately, he didn't know much about Jean Hauser. He thought that Jean Hauser was with Jean Yi and the others. However, he didn't know that in Jean Hauser's heart, nothing could compare to his determination to destroy the Jean family. Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes and looked at Uncle Chi's face. "Give me the Jean family?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Of course." Uncle Chi still had a trace of pride in his heart. "Isn't this your goal?" Jean Hauser pursed his lips into a straight line. He looked straight at Uncle Chi, his eyes cold. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes was unbearable. Uncle Chi suddenly realized that something was wrong. No matter what, he was an old man who had been by Jean Kuen's side for a long time. How could he be shocked by the gaze of a junior? But in that instant he actually felt a chill run down his spine. Jean Hauser didn't speak. Uncle Chi swallowed his saliva and tried his best to stabilize his tone. "You should know what to do for such a good thing, right?" Jean Hauser, who was sitting on the sofa, finally changed his posture. He snapped his fingers. Soon someone came in. "Throw it out." These 3 simple words caused Uncle Chi's eyes to widen. He couldn't believe that the face he had been proud of in front of Jean Kuen for half his life had disappeared just like that. "Jean Hauser, do you know what you're doing?" Uncle Chi's expression changed the moment his arm was lifted. Before he was dragged away, Jean Hauser finally got up. He walked in front of Uncle Chi extremely slowly and looked at Uncle Chi with sinister eyes. "I've always known what I'm doing. It's you guys who don't know. I don't care about the Jean family. All I want is to destroy him." Looking at Uncle Chi's shocked eyes, he curled his lips coldly. "After all, someone has to be buried with them for what happened back then. Don't you think so?" Uncle Chi was really shocked this time. He widened his eyes and looked at Jean Hauser. He couldn't believe that Jean Hauser actually knew what happened back then. "What nonsense are you talking about? What happened back then?" He wanted to play dumb, but Jean Hauser didn't have the patience to accompany him. He waved his hand and said, "Throw it out." Uncle Chi, who had been by Jean Kuen's side for half his life, was thrown out just like that. Jean Hauser sat back on the sofa, and Tang Hua entered the door at this moment. He bent down. "Boss, Jean Yi asked someone to pass a message that he wants to see you." "Jean Yi?" Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes and thought of some of Jean Yi's recent actions. He still had some ability, but compared to his determination, it wasn't enough. "I won't see him." Jean Hauser stood up. "Prepare the plane and fly to Lin City. Let 6th and 7th brother keep a close eye on the rest of the matters here." "Yes." Tang Hua looked at Jean Hauser's expression and had the rare thought of joking with him. "Do you want to see sister-in-law?" It had been 2 months since Jean Hauser last returned to Lin City. Jean Hauser glared at Tang Hua. He didn't deny it, but his footsteps quickened. In the past 2 months, Shi Mingwan's life had been very smooth. After the French competition, the studio recruited 2 more newcomers. The newcomers' abilities weren't bad. After trying them out for more than 2 months, she realized that they were all promising talents. The design concept and ideas were also very compatible with her. The studio's business was booming, and she also began to get involved in work, making herself busy. Ever since that day, Jean Hauser never came to look for her again. She had dreamed of that man. She dreamed that he had secretly made the key to her house again and came to her house to see her. However, when she woke up, she realized that it was a dream. After she woke up, she even smelled Jean Hauser's aura in the room. This made her wonder if she was hallucinating. Fortunately, she never dreamed of Jean Hauser again after that day. This made her relax, but at the same time, she felt a little disappointed. It was impossible to forget, not for the rest of her life. whether it was their first encounter when she was 12 years old or everything after their reunion. For Shi Mengwan, those were memories engraved in the depths of her heart and couldn't be forgotten. She was still thinking that perhaps she needed more time to force herself to forget everything. However, before she could give herself time to calm down, Mother Shi couldn't sit still anymore. Ever since she saw Zhang Haoze last time, Mother Shi had been worried. She originally thought that Shi Mengwan was a child who knew her limits, but she never expected that she would actually have something to do with someone who had a fiancé. This wasn't something Mother Shi could tolerate. After thinking about it, she felt that she had cared too little about Shi Mengwan. So when she returned home, she thought about it carefully and felt that she still had to let Shi Mengwan go on a blind date. The people she knew outside were so unreliable. But a blind date was different. The people she met on a blind date were, firstly, they knew each other well, and secondly, as a mother, she could help check them out. What could be more suitable and ideal than this? After thinking it through, Mother Shi took Shi Mengwan's matter to heart. The unlucky one was Shi Mengwan. Her mother arranged blind dates every 2 or 3 days. As for the blind dates, most of them were from the town. Other than the town, there were also some distant relatives who were far away and had no relationship with Shi Mengwan. When they heard that Mother Shi was looking for someone to go on a blind date with Shi Mengwan, they introduced them. From the town, from the county, and from Lin City. Shi Mengwan was extremely annoyed, but she couldn't refuse. As soon as she refused, Mother Shi asked, "Are you still unable to forget that guy surnamed Zhan?" As soon as these words came over, in order to prove that she had forgotten about that guy surnamed Zhan, Shi Mengwan had been on many blind dates during this period of time. That afternoon, she was just about to ask Xiao Ji to order takeout. Her phone rang. It was still Mother Shi. Without exception, it was about her blind date again. First, she talked about the man's conditions, then how good he was. Of course, all the blind dates, without exception, were able to accept marrying into the family. They were willing to be a live-in son-in-law, and the child they gave birth to would be surnamed Shi. Sometimes, Shi Mengwan couldn't help but admire her. Where did her mother find so many people who were willing to agree to her family's conditions? Or could it be that men nowadays had already settled for the next best thing? She heard that the ratio of men to women was out of balance. In 2 years, there would be at least 30 million bachelors. In the past, Shi Mengwan didn't believe it, but now that she thought about it, it might really be true. After all, if it weren't for the fact that so many men couldn't get a wife, how could they casually agree to such conditions? She sighed in her heart and finally hung up the phone. However, not long after, her phone rang again. Shi Mengwan was already weak. "Hey, what's wrong?" Afraid that Mother Shi would miss her for a long time again, she spoke first. "I understand. Don't remind me anymore. Tonight at 7 p.m., Starlight Cafe. Don't worry, since I promised you, I will naturally go." However, the person on the other end of the phone was a familiar voice to Shi Mengwan. "Mengwan, are you going on a blind date?" Shi Mengwan was stunned for a moment. Only then did she realize that she had hung up the phone without looking at the caller ID. "Wan Xianyang? It's me." Wan Xianyang's voice sounded a little mischievous. "Mengwan is going on a blind date, but she actually didn't consider me. It really makes me sad." "Wan Xianyang." Shi Mengwan really couldn't respond to this. "You, just cancel your blind date tonight. With me around, what blind date do you need?" "How? That was arranged by my mother." "Do you have Auntie's phone number? Do you need me to call her personally to explain?" "Wan Xianyang, stop fooling around." How could Shi Mengwan dare to let him contact Mother Shi? It wouldn't be good if there was a misunderstanding. "I'm not fooling around. I'm serious." "Wan Xianyang." Shi Mengwan had a headache. "Don't cause trouble. I'll solve it myself." Using the excuse that she was going to eat, Shi Mengwan sent Wan Xianyang away. After hanging up the phone, Shi Mengwan was in a daze for a long time. What she liked didn't like her. What she liked didn't like her. It really was. Shi Mengwan thought about it and didn't continue to take this matter to heart. Right now, she had received another order, and the other party specifically asked her to design it. So she busied herself again. When it was time to get off work, Shi Mengwan, who didn't want to give up, decided to go to Starlight Cafe. Little Ji, Little Chio, and the others hadn't gotten off work yet. When they saw Shi Mengwan's fearless expression, they were a little amused. It was a secret of the whole studio that Shi Mengwan was forced to go on a blind date. After all, Mother Shi had specially come to the studio before she left last time. Firstly, he wanted to see his daughter's working environment and thank these people for taking care of her. Secondly, he was here to see if there were any suitable candidates for his daughter. Later on, he would call from time to time to arrange blind dates. If Shi Mengwan didn't pick up the phone, someone would pick it up for her. In this way, the entire studio knew about it. Their expressions of watching a good show provoked Shi Mengwan. She gritted her teeth and glared at those people. If you guys keep laughing, you won't get your bonus this month. Xiao Ji and the others didn't dare to laugh. Shi Mengwan finally felt much better. However, he still had no choice but to go to Starlight Cafe. It was said that the location of the blind date was arranged by the blind date. It was quite close to Shi Mengwan's studio. Even if Shi Mengwan was unwilling, she had to admit it. The person arranged by Mother Shi was quite reliable. There were very few weirdos like what they said on the internet. That was true. After Shi Mengwan saw Zhang Haoze, she became paranoid. Although there were quite a few men, they all wanted to dig up the 18 generations of each other's ancestors. Under such circumstances, the blind dates that appeared in front of Shi Mengwan were really acceptable. After entering the door, Shi Mengwan's gaze subconsciously searched for her, who she didn't know was the 18th or 19th blind date. Before she came, Shi Mengwan had already sent the photo to her phone. She hadn't had the time to look at it. Now, she took out her phone and took a look. The bespectacled man looked gentle and cultured. He wasn't her type. Now that he was here, she had to meet him. Looking around, she didn't find her blind date. Shi Mengwan picked up a seat and sat down. She picked up her phone and scrolled through Weibo. There was one hot topic today, and it was asking about the weirdo blind dates you've met. Shi Mengwan casually glanced at it and looked at the variety of weirdo men on it. She agreed with Mother Shi's taste a lot. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that she couldn't forget about Zhang Haoze, she would have randomly picked one of the blind dates that Shi Mengwan had chosen. It wouldn't have been too bad. However, today's blind date didn't appear for a long time. Shi Mengwan looked at the time. It had already been 10 minutes since 7 o'clock, but the blind date hadn't arrived yet. This had never happened before. Could something have happened on the way? Shi Mengwan didn't want to think so, but she still had to think of calling to contact him. However, before she could get through, someone had already sat down opposite her. Mengwan. Wan Xianyang was holding a large bouquet of roses in his hand. Looking at Shi Mengwan's surprised face, he smiled brightly. Long time no see. Shi Mengwan wasn't in a hurry to take the flowers that Wan Xianyang handed over. She didn't get through, so she was still thinking about continuing. If you want to call your blind date with the surname Chen, you don't have to. Wan Xianyang reminded her very kindly, I've already talked to him just now. After he heard that I'm your boyfriend, he was very generous and said that he wished us happiness. Shi Mengwan didn't know what expression she was going to put on anymore. Looking at Wan Xianyang, she sighed in her heart. Wan Xianyang, actually, you don't have to do this. I can handle it. Wan Xianyang frowned. Do you think I'm trying to help you get rid of your blind date? Isn't it? Of course not. Wan Xianyang stood up angrily, then quickly sat down again. He put the bouquet of flowers aside and looked at Shi Mengwan's face very seriously. I'm serious. Since you want to go on a blind date, why didn't you consider me? Would I be worse than those blind dates? Stop fooling around. It was that bespectacled man just now. He didn't even do anything. He just shook his fist, and the other party retreated. How could such a man be worthy of Wanwan? I didn't mean that. Then what did you mean? Wan Xianyang originally didn't plan to meet Shi Mengwan this time. After all, he could only stay in Lin City for 2 days this time, and there were still many things he hadn't done. However, he originally wanted to make a call to make his presence known in front of Shi Mengwan, but he didn't expect to hear about I-8if, which she was going on a blind date. We're not suitable. What's not suitable? Wan Xianying didn't understand. You're talking about family background. My family isn't the kind of family that looks after their disciples. Our one family also has a precedent of marriage alliances with small families. You're talking about feelings. I'm sincere to you. Isn't that better than those blind dates that we've only met a few times? Besides, even if you feel that you won't have a partner when you marry to Rong City and are unwilling, don't you still have sister-in-law? Hu Jinyao and I are childhood friends. If you really get together with me, won't you be able to keep sister-in-law company? I really can't think of how I'm not as good as those blind dates of yours. Ever since they met, Wan Xianying had always been gentle and polite. His humor didn't hide his utilitarian nature as a businessman. However, it was the first time Shi Mengwan had seen Wan Xianying say such a long string of words in one breath. She shifted her gaze slightly and looked at the bouquet of red roses. Because you'll never be able to meet my conditions. What do you mean? Wan Xianying didn't quite understand. On one hand, Shi Mengwan really wanted him to give up, and on the other hand, she was also very serious about her conditions. My mother and my father only had 2 daughters, me and my sister. And I promised my parents that if I want to get married in the future, I'll find a son-in-law. Son-in-law? Wan Xianying's expression was a little strange. What do you mean? That's right. Our family wants our son-in-law to marry into our family. The child we give birth to will have my surname. Shi Mengwan's words were especially firm. This time, Wan Xianying wasn't in a hurry to speak. He sat on the chair, as if he didn't expect Shi Mengwan to say such a thing. Are you joking with me? No. Shi Mengwan shook her head. I'm serious. Seeing that Wan Xianying still hadn't reacted, she said very softly, Wan Xianying, don't waste time on me. I know your identity very well, so I know that your family won't let you be a son-in-law, and it's even more impossible for the child you give birth to have my surname. Since you know it's impossible, why are you so obsessed with me? Shi Mengwan hadn't specially inquired about Wan Xianying's family background, but there were some things that she didn't need to inquire about to know. Hu Jinyao's childhood friend had quite an impressive family background. The antique shop under his name was almost making a lot of money every day. He had a family background, and he had an external appearance. How could such a man agree to marry into the family? Shi Mengwan said all she had to say. She took advantage of Wan Xianying's daze to stand up. She said that she was going to the bathroom, but she was actually giving Wan Xianying time to digest her words. She believed that Wan Xianying understood and might leave later. She went into the bathroom and washed her face to calm down. No matter what, today's blind date was avoided. After all, with Wan Xianying around, she didn't need to send away the previous blind date. However, she was happy too early. The water on her face hadn't dried yet when Mother Shi called. What's wrong with you? Are you with that Zhang guy again? Why did I hear that you didn't go on a blind date properly, but got someone to chase that person away? Mom, it's nothing like that. If it's not John, then who is it? Wan, don't tell me you didn't want to go on a blind date, so you found a random man to brush me off? I didn't, Mom. Shi Mengwan felt that sometimes she really couldn't talk to Mother Shi. While she was still thinking about how to explain, she kept walking forward. She walked a little too fast and didn't notice that there was someone in front of her. The moment her body bumped into someone, the phone in her palm almost flew out. When the phone left her palm, Shi Mengwan wanted to grab it, but the person was one step ahead of her. He caught the phone and placed it in her hand. Shi Mengwan stood there and subconsciously pinched it, but she couldn't care less about listening to Mother Shi's words. She just stared blankly at the person in front of her. The two of them hadn't seen each other for almost 2 months. The man in front of her was still tall, but his expression was tired. He had also lost a lot of weight. At this moment he was looking at her. His eyes were curved, and he seemed to be full of gentleness. Shi Mengwan was shocked by his gaze. She even forgot that Mother Shi was still talking on the other end of the phone. It wasn't until Mother Shi roared again that she casually said that she had something to do and hung up the phone. Just as she hung up the phone, her body was pulled into the arms of the man in front of her. He hugged her a little hard, but he restrained himself from hurting her. He gently rubbed his chin against the top of her hair. Shi Mingwan's body stiffened. She didn't expect Zhang Haoze to appear in front of her again. One. She heard his voice. I miss you so much. It was a gentle voice without a trace of hostility. Accompanied by his hug, he revealed his intentions in such a simple manner. Shi Mingwan couldn't move for a moment. She thought that it might be because she had suppressed herself too much for the past 2 months, so she was hallucinating. Otherwise, why would she see Zhang Haoze in broad daylight? It was one thing to see Zhang Haoze, but to see such a gentle Zhang Haoze. You, she wanted to speak. Her lips moved, but she didn't know what to say. Zhang Haoze gently tightened his arms and hugged her waist. He used half of his strength to pull her body closer to him. I miss you so much. He said it again. The weather in Lin City was getting colder, but it wasn't cold. The man was wearing a shirt and no tie. The temperature of his chest was burning her face. She couldn't help but raise her head to look at him. He was also looking at her. The moment their eyes met, he lowered his head and accurately kissed her lips. At that moment, Shi Mingwan seemed to see fireworks exploding in the sky. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.